Usually on a point of order, a member of parliament is allowed to interrupt the contributions of another member. However, circumstances were different in this case. A result of Dr. Minnis refusing to withdraw allegations made against Prime Minister the Right Honourable Perry Christie regarding his relationship with Canadian billionaire Mr. Peter Nygaard relative to the stem cell bill. What amounted to a 10-minute suspension break seemed even longer as anticipation mounted. And then the House was called back in session. Golden Gate's Member of Parliament Shane Gibson attempted to make his contribution once more, but yet again that would not happen. Member of Parliament for Long Island, the Honourable Loretta Butler Turner, stood on a point of order. Unable to even state her case, Government Leader in the House, the Honourable Dr. Bernard Nottage, rose to his feet, making this unplanned and abrupt announcement.
It's been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until August 7th, 2013 at 10 a.m.
As quick as it started, House of Assembly proceedings had ended. I'm Carla Palmer for the Parliamentary Channel.
We have no idea whether a meeting between the Speaker and the member for Kalani, Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Hubert Minnis, will mitigate what happened the last time. Members met, and we will see different results today. Again, we don't know. Where did this whole thing start? Well, the debate is supposed to be and is about stem cell research and therapy. Back on April the 10th, when the government and the country was actually marking 45 years since pivotal elections in 1968. That was when the PLP really took control of the government, because back in 67, that was a coalition. In 68, following the death of Uriah McPhee, Prime Minister Pinling took his party to the polls, and of course they had a convincing victory. April 10th, marking that anniversary, Prime Minister Christie took the opportunity to make a communication on stem cell research and therapy. Here's Prime Minister Christie back on April the 10th and his communication on stem cell research and therapy.
Mr. Speaker, as I begin my communication, this is one of the very interesting communications to be made today, and it is with respect to stem cell research and therapy legislation. And as I begin, please permit me this observation, that as I look to the athletes in the chamber, I wondered whether I used to look like that when I was an athlete. So young and so full of life, and you know, the future beckoning. And of course, since I'm on my feet, I think I should again remind you that you are looking at someone who was a medal winner in the field of athletics internationally. I mean, you all appreciate that? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And for the young athletes who are here, I was the second Bahamian to win a medal in track and field after Tommy Robinson. I was a triple jumper, and I see a young female triple jumper sitting in the front row there. So all you have to do is don't pattern yourself after your brother, pattern yourself after me. And it's the sister of Levan Sands, the triple jumper. Of course, because I was competing at a time when we didn't have the facilities that they have, you have to measure my accomplishments as significantly superior to what they're doing today. But in any event, we will have an opportunity. I'm going to move very quickly through this communication, so we will have an opportunity to speak to their success. And as I indicated to them, it's really about doing your best at all times when you are competing. No. phone? Whose phone? You can check my phone. No, not mine. It is my honor, Mr. Speaker, to present a bill for an act to regulate stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas. I am also tabling for this esteemed body's consideration proposed regulations to implement that act. Mr. Speaker, we've had the privilege of meeting with the levels of expertise that I think will enable us to move forward. I had a fascinating experience myself of attending an anti-aging conference where I sat in a conference hall in Las Vegas and listening to presentations on stem cell, and 90% of which, of course, just flew over my head as to the science of it. But as we progressed in this and we watched what was happening internationally, people like Kobe Bryant flying to Germany for interventions, people like the governor of Texas and being able to have interventions with respect to a back ailment, and then we began to have a greater sense of what is happening. So, Mr. Speaker, stem cell science is evolving rapidly and carries the promise of bringing us therapies that will revolutionize medicine. Stem cells are precursors to mature cells. Their ability to duplicate themselves and to become various kinds of cells give them greater potential for healing injuries and regenerating healthy tissues. And Mr. Speaker, so that there be no doubt, this communication was to be made by the Minister of Health, the Member of Parliament for North Andros, the Berry Islands, who had to leave the Bahamas to attend to very serious medical circumstances involving a member of his family. And so I have therefore substituted for him in making this communication. But the basis of it is that the Bahamas has an opportunity to become a world leader among nations in this field, and this legislation is designed to help achieve that goal. Of course, the Bahamas is already well known for medical research. For example, we achieved international recognition in the area maternal to fetal transmission of HIV/AIDS research through our collaboration with Professor Stanley Reed of the University of Toronto. Supported by advances in science such as gene mapping, stem cell therapy appears to be the medicine of the future. In fact, some would say that it is the medicine of the day. Indeed, it has already demonstrated well-recognized benefits in certain areas, such as in reconstituting the immune system after chemotherapy for leukemia. More recently, we have heard about successes that stem cell therapy has had in rapidly restoring well-known athletes to the top of their game after serious injuries. The Bahamas has now has the opportunity to host several important stem cell initiatives. Corporations, companies interested in establishing stem cell research and therapy centers in the Bahamas are proposing to build healthcare facilities and laboratories, create jobs, and offer treatments that will improve the lives of many of our citizens. These projects also promise to attract leading scientists to conduct research, establish institutions and centers of excellence, and relocate them here in the Bahamas. And let me say that I have personally met with any number of esteemed professors, whether of surgery or medicine, who are connected to academia, Duke University, University of Miami, Mayo Clinic, University of Tennessee, all of whom are evidencing a major interest in moving into the Bahamas to be a part of establishing health centers here in the Bahamas. So if we were to succeed in attracting these scientists and their financial supporters, we will create many important opportunities for young Bahamian scientists and physicians. These leaders in science and medicine will train many young Bahamian scientists with the skills they need to succeed locally and on a wider world stage. Our young Bahamian scientists and doctors will be able to establish thriving professional lives right here in the Bahamas. They will then be able to contribute back to our community in the years to come, as well as to the international community. These projects and future stem cell initiatives hold the key to geometric growth of the life science industry in our country. They will generate new jobs at many levels and will fuel accelerated growth of our economy. That growth will not be limited to the medical and scientific industries. It will have spillover effects on all areas in our economy, including our substantial tourism industry. It will provide one more reason for the world to regard the Bahamas as an ideal location not only to visit, but also to live in and in which to invest. And let me just say here, by way of recent history, as we were coming to power and forming the government last May, we knew that our predecessors and the Minister of Health, who's now the leader of the opposition, had to deal with an application for Grand Bahama where the people connected with that application had come into the country and had made investments in the country and had the ethical committee of the Ministry of Health approve the investment, but that investment was turned down ultimately by the Minister of Health, and therefore when we came in, that was the status of that particular application. The application continues to be. What you will find that we did as a government, we decided that rather than deal on the basis of our own knowledge and of the existing legislation in our country, that we would move to establish a new regime, and for that regime to govern the existence of the presence of stem cell facilities or facilities involved in stem cell research and therapies. And that, Mr. Speaker, is what we are now bringing to Parliament today, where we have taken our time, we have resisted the attractiveness of jobs now because we know that we want to protect and preserve the reputation of the Bahamas, and therefore we would wish, in dealing with this very, very significant matter, to deal with it in the right way. So I assure you, Mr. Speaker, that my government is fully aware of the concerns we must address before allowing stem cell research and therapy to proceed. We commissioned a task force to study this issue that has already been the subject of communication. The task force issued a thorough and thoughtful report summarizing the current state of stem cell science and of ethical debate regarding related controversial issues. We have also recently took counsel from the Christian Coalition, along with ongoing consultation within the medical and science communities. Based on all input we received, our position is that before allowing stem cell research or therapy in our country, we must first establish a legal framework for regulating this new science and medical practice. Consequently, we have halted the pending stem cell proposals until we do so. We recognize that it is critical to have in place a system to approve and monitor stem cell research and therapy to protect our reputation, guard against rogue scientists and scandals, ensure the safety of patients in the Bahamas, and assure our people that all stem cell research and therapy will be conducted in accordance with our own ethical values following international best practices. That's a mouthful, but that's what it amounts to. Accordingly, we are proposing that in this act and accompanying regulations, or we are proposing the act that I'm about to introduce, or the bill that we're about to introduce today, and accompanying regulations. This legal framework will create a regulatory regime covering all aspects of stem cell research, namely, 1, clinical research, in other words, testing stem cells in people. 2, non-clinical research, which includes bench research in laboratories as well as non-human animal research. And 3, therapeutic uses in people. The framework will prohibit and deter procedures that are unethical or scientifically unfounded, such as human reproductive cloning. It will establish strict regulatory standards and procedures for non-clinical and clinical research and for therapy, as well as for ancillary functions such as transporting and storing stem cells. It will establish licensing and oversight mechanisms to ensure that everyone in the country who engages in stem cell research or therapy meets those high standards. And it will establish enforcement mechanisms and legal penalties through which the Minister of Health and the government will be able to ensure that these legal standards are upheld. And these are some details of the oversight provisions. Our bill and proposed regulations would create a strict oversight regime to ensure that no prohibited procedures occur in the Bahamas, and that stem cell research and therapy here complies with the highest scientific and ethical standards. A significant component of that regime is that every facility or laboratory used for stem cell research or therapy must obtain a license under the Hospital and Healthcare Facility Act. This provision will subject all those facilities and laboratories to inspections by individuals with appropriate qualifications, which the Minister of Health has authority to specify by regulations. The provision will also subject those facilities and laboratories to fees set by the Minister of Health, which will be used to cover the costs necessary to hire or train qualified inspectors. Another important component of the oversight regime involves committee review. Every person who conducts research on or provides treatment using stem cells must secure review by a scientific review committee and an ethics committee. Each scientific review committee must ensure that a sound scientific basis exists for permitting the proposed research or therapy to proceed. It will also ensure that the individuals proposing to conduct stem cell research or therapy have appropriate training and appropriate levels of experience. In short, this review will protect us and weed out unethical sciences. The Ethics Committee will ensure that all stem cell research and therapy meet the highest ethical standards and are consistent with traditional Bahamian values. To ensure that the Scientific Review and Ethics Committee provides effective oversight, a national committee will be created. This is now overlapping that committee. A national committee will be created to review and approve the credentials of the members of all scientific review and ethics committees in the country, or all of those committees in the country, both upon their creation and every year, all annual reviews. The regulations set forth certain minimal criteria for the membership credentials of the committees. The National Committee will also issue guidelines on determining which types of research and therapy are permissible, restricted, or prohibited. The National Committee itself will also review particularly sensitive categories of proposed research or therapy, such as those involving more than minimal manipulation of the stem cells previously derived stem cells or somatic cell nuclear transfer. As a recipient of reports from all the committees, the National Committee will have certain other duties. These duties include educating the public about the stem cell law and regulations and about stem cells generally. They also include ensuring that knowledge gained during the course of stem cell research and therapy conducted in the Bahamas is used to the maximum benefit of Bahamians and is made available to Bahamian physicians and healthcare practitioners. The National Committee will be appointed by the Minister of Health and must include persons with credentials in science, medicine, commerce, religion, education, ethics, and law. It must also have at least one member who is recognized internationally as a leader in stem cell science. And just as I move to conclude, brief details about enforcement and accountability. The bill and regulations also propose a number of provisions providing the Minister of Health with authority to enforce the law and regulations. Those include the ability to suspend a licensed facility. They also include financial and criminal penalties for violations. The National Committee must submit a report to the Minister of Health annually on certain stem cell activities. The Minister must lay the report on the table of both Houses of Parliament. And so the levels of accountability are layer upon layer upon layer, and the ultimate level of accountability is reporting to the Houses of Parliament. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I believe that this proposed legislation and these implementing regulations that are laid today are very important prerequisites to stem cell research and therapy being allowed to occur in the Bahamas. I appreciate your careful consideration of these provisions and look forward to public vetting of these proposals to ensure that the resulting legal framework has strong support. And it is our intention, Mr. Speaker, to present them to Parliament and to allow the bill and the draft and the regulations to obviously be looked at and examined and thought about by those who are members of Parliament, but also to hold it here as consultations continue, even though we have had extensive consultations with the Christian community and medical fraternity, but will continue. So, Mr. Speaker, it is with privilege that I present this, Mr. Speaker, as a major advance in medical tourism in this country, but also more particularly in the field of science, with every intention, Mr. Speaker, of ensuring that Bahamian medical practitioners, Bahamian scientists, are integrated into this new world-class enterprise that we are establishing in the Bahamas. And we do so knowing that we are fulfilling on a continuing basis the promise that we made to the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
That was Prime Minister Christie laying the foundation for the stem cell debate that the government has been trying to conclude over the last several weeks, unsuccessfully so. Want to welcome the listeners from Radio 1540, the National Voice, Radio 810 in Grand Bahama, and of course 104.5. I also want to tell you we are streaming, livestream.com/ZNS Bahamas. You can visit us on Facebook. You can also go to the ZNS website, www.znsbahamas.com. Prime Minister Christie, of course, talking about the fact that he'd met with persons from Toronto and from the University of Miami, and the fact that a company had been given a provisional license by the Ethics Committee, but that license had been stopped by the then Minister of Health, who is now the leader of the opposition, Dr. Hubert Minnis. His government deciding, of course, that they would start and build a new foundation. Well, let's join them now in the House of Assembly as they prepare to begin debate this morning on the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill. ready to begin that debate. And so what we will do instead, though, is listen to some of Dr. Perry Gomez, who back on the 3rd of July actually began the debate, and he moved for the first reading of that bill. Here's Dr. Perry Gomez beginning the debate on stem cell research and therapy.
Once again, due to the support of my wonderful people in North Andros and the Berry Islands, whom I have the privilege to serve. Mr. Speaker, on this almost the 40th anniversary of independence day as we meet in Parliament, I rise to begin the debate on the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill 2013. I think it is fitting, really, that this landmark piece of legislation is being brought to the Bahamian people by this Progressive Liberal Party government, because, as history has shown, all of the progressive ideas primarily came from this side. The Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill 2013 was presented to this Honorable House on Wednesday, the 10th of April, for its first reading, 2013, by the Right Honorable Prime Minister, at which time the bill was formally tabled for public consideration. Since the tabling of the bill to the present date, my government has organized and encouraged extensive consultative meetings with a broad spectrum of relevant stakeholders across the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The government is very pleased to share our feedback and findings with this Honorable House at this time. It is my honor as Minister for Health in this PLP administration to present this stem cell research therapy bill to be debated by the honorable members of this House on the path to enactment. And right here I may pause, Mr. Speaker, to pay tribute to the staff of the Attorney General's office and my medical colleagues who assisted so much in the events of the past few months, bringing us to this point. And finally, for this time, I would like to pay tribute to the Right Honorable Prime Minister, who tabled the first reading of the bill in my absence, as I was off to Washington to see my very sick sibling. I want to pay tribute to the Prime Minister because I don't think there's anybody else in this country who has the interest and vision about stem cell therapies and its possibilities that he has. And I find it surprising, the level of interest a lawyer and politician who is so busy. I just got the answer. A lawyer and politician would have to be so dedicated to seeing the success of this exercise. And so I pay tribute to him for that. Mr. Speaker, a few months ago, the discussions related to stem cell research and therapy was a part of a selective conversation in the Bahamas, mainly among scientists and physicians. However, today, within a relatively short period, stem cell research and therapy is a buzz phrase in common conversation amongst professionals and the laity alike. As to the importance of this pending legislation, impact on the development of science and the economy of the Bahamas, this enabling legislation that has been embraced in the mainstream by the news media has created a renewed interest in the potential benefits of medical tourism to positively impact the GDP of the Bahamas. For honorable members of this House, this bill can be a defining moment in the history of Parliament, because by its enactment, it will cause the scientific and professional environment in the Bahamas to take a quantum leap in the future delivery of medical care in our country. I think it's similar, perhaps, to the discovery of penicillin and the antibiotic paradigm shift that took place after Dr. Alexander Fleming in 1928 discovered penicillin. And stem cell research is showing the same kind of potential for a similar paradigm shift to occur in the delivery of health care. If I may pause here, all you have to do is to surf the net, Mr. Speaker, and there are numerous articles in many countries trying to outpace the other in bringing in legislation and so on to enable stem cell therapies to be had in their countries. So we are part of this excited generation, if you wish, to be involved in what is going to be historic in medicine, and it has already begun. The science related to stem cell research is the most rapidly evolving in the area of pure science, bringing with it the therapies that heretofore were only imagined, thus revolutionizing the entire healthcare industry. Stem cells are precursors to mature cells. Their ability to duplicate themselves and to become various kinds of cells give them the great potential for healing injuries and regenerating tissues. The Bahamas has an opportunity to become a world leader in this field. This legislation is designed to help achieve that goal. Why is the Bahamas poised? Owing to the international collaborative research done in the Bahamas since 1992, then with the University of Toronto in relationship to the transmission of HIV from mothers to babies, the core capability for attaining international standards for ethics oversight for major research projects was established. Today, the Bahamas has, and listen to this, the Bahamas has recognition, registration, and certification status with the National Institutes of Health of the United States of America in Washington, D.C. And it's good until 2015. And this came as a result of the work and basic research we did in collaboration with the National Institutes of Health as we worked to uncover the pathophysiology of HIV in the newborn baby. As a developing country, the importance of the NIH Association establishes the personnel and infrastructure that is so significant to the Bahamas, and has set in place a core team upon which to build a sound ethical oversight committee for future research. It is realized that all of the required expertise are not now domiciled in the Bahamas, and therefore it would be necessary to create a favorable environment to attract appropriate engagement of very specialized experts to strengthen and enhance what exists locally to the required levels to build a robust, internationally, professionally respected cadre of individuals in this area of research. Once the Bahamas readies itself to fully participate and to take a cutting-edge position in the global healthcare industry, there's going to be a number of opportunities to welcome the return of Bahamian scientists from across the globe to contribute to the development of science in the Bahamas. The healthcare physical infrastructure would have to be state-of-the-art facilities with standards that meet international accreditation. And I pause here to say, again from the HIV program, the HIV laboratory that was established only a few years ago is right now being readied for inspection, for certification by the CDC as an accredited laboratory. It will be the first in the Bahamas and only the second accredited lab in the entire Caribbean, the other one being in Barbados. And this will happen, Mr. Speaker. The accreditation visit is in about 2 weeks. As well as all the professionals participating in this research industry will have to be certified with professional licensure to perform the tasks for which they have approval. As a result of this, the overall quality of health practices in the country would by necessity improve to the benefit of all Bahamians. In addition to the direct higher paying jobs created in the healthcare industry resulting from the passage of this bill, it is expected that there will be a considerable number of other jobs which would be an indirect spin-off from this action. For instance, tourism-related jobs, hotel workers, taxis, drivers, security officers, caretaking, etc. With this understanding of the overall impact of all facets of the Bahamian society, my government, under the direction of the Ministry of Health and the Attorney General's Office, had an extensive consultation series of meetings with the Christian Council, the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce, the Medical Association of the Bahamas, the Nurses Association of Bahamas, the Dental Association of Bahamas, Private Nurses Association, the Dental Private Healthcare Facilities Owners, healthcare providers in Grand Bahama, and scientists at the College of the Bahamas. There was overall support for the bill and enthusiasm that such an enabling legislation was being introduced in the Bahamas. Concern was expressed that the use of embryos in human beings and cloning should not be allowed, which is in keeping with the recommendations of the bill. Also, that enforcement was considered to be an area of potential administrative weakness, so particular measures would be necessary to ensure compliance to the Act. That is, more qualified personnel in the inspectorate and close monitoring of the research and therapy projects. Particular cultural and ethical considerations, which are peculiar to the Bahamian people, have been taken into account in the drafting of the legislation and to ensure harmonization in the implementation of the regulations that would happen as a result of the Act. Accordingly, we are proposing this Act and accompanying regulations. This legal framework will create a regulatory regime covering all aspects of stem cell research, namely clinical research, in other words, testing stem cells in people. 2, non-clinical research, which includes bench research in labs, as well as non-human animal research. And 3, therapeutic uses in people. The framework will prohibit and deter procedures that are unethical or scientifically unfounded, such as human reproductive procedures and human cloning. It will establish strict regulatory standards and procedures for non-clinical and clinical research and for therapy, as well as for ancillary functions such as transporting and storing of stem cells. Mr. Speaker, I may pause here to say, you may ask why the storage of stem cells. There are 1 or 2 members perhaps in this room who have stored the stem cells of their siblings at birth in another country, so that in future their own stem cells will be available to them in the event they develop certain illnesses. And I know that because my nephew is one. And that's another industry that is a spin-off of the stem cell legislation, the proper storage of stem cells by individuals for their children, if not for themselves. And there's a whole protocol surrounding the storage of stem cells. In the case of my nephew, his children's stem cells are stored in Canada. Just as a purpose for illustration. And it's an established practice. It will establish licensing and oversight mechanisms to ensure that everyone in the country who engages in stem cell research or therapy meets those standards.
Opportunity presenting itself, we will let you hear some more of that. Right now, we're going to join members of the House of Assembly as they prepare to begin this morning session and debate conclusion, hopefully, on the stem cell research and therapy. Let's join members of the House now.
Read from Dr. Mark. Mark. Very interesting verse. It says, "At evening, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. Then he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him." Mark chapter 1, verses 32 to 34. Sometimes you can find a sermon in the oddest place. I looked in my little book room and picked out a 1997 copy of the Reader's Digest. And I was fascinated by the caption, "Feel better, live longer without dieting." And secondly, on bold print, "How to raise polite kids in a rude world." I was tempted to use that when I spoke at one of my classmates' funeral. I don't know how I forgot it. How to raise polite kids in a rude world. That's the outside cover. Now inside is very interesting. And you know, Reader's Digest has this interesting thing of medicine is good, laughter is the best medicine, all that kind of stuff. The teacher announced that to practice spelling, each member of the class would say what their father did for a living and then spell the occupation. Mary went first. "My dad is a baker, B-A-K-E-R. And if he were here, he would give everyone a cookie." Next came Tommy. "My dad is a banker, B-A-N-K-E-R. And if he were here, he would give each of us a quarter." Third came Jimmy. "My dad is an electrician." But try as Jimmy did, he just couldn't spell the word electrician. The teacher asked him to sit and think about it for a moment while she called on someone else. So then she turned to little Johnny. Johnny spoke. "My dad is a bookie, B-O-O-K-I-E. And if he were here, he'd lay you 8-5 that Jimmy ain't never going to spell electrician." Can you spell emancipation? Can you spell discipline? Can you spell parliament? Maybe it's a spelling day. Maybe spell it right. Let us pray. Great God and our Father, we hallow your name this August morning, grateful for the life you've given to us. For in you we must live and move and have our very being. We love you, Lord, because you first loved us, and we thank you for the freedoms you've given to this country. We ask your blessing today on our House of Assembly, our Speaker, our leaders in every phase of this country, the Governor General, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and all those who are in authority. Lord, in thy mercy, teach us how to behave ourselves wisely and how to be patient and how to respect order and authority and discipline. Deliver us in thy mercy from ourselves and from the rude world about us. Hear our prayer today, O Lord, and bless our children, especially those who are now getting ready to go back to school in a few weeks. We ask your grace to be sufficient for each and every one of us, and we thank you for hearing our prayer today, which we humbly offer in the precious name of the Prince of Peace, the Lord Jesus Christ, who taught us when we pray to say together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. God bless you.
Good morning, honorable members. It is certainly a delight to be alive today, and I welcome you back into this honorable House of Assembly. I'm particularly pleased for that exhortation given by the esteemed chaplain of this chamber that was laced with humor, but yet a profound message. We are grateful, sir, for your continued counsel. Today is Wednesday, the 7th of August in the year of our Lord 2013. Welcome once again to the sitting of this honorable House. Prior to the resumption of the order of the day of this Parliament, the Chair will make a communication. The Chair always becomes very excited when young people are around. And in particular, we are pleased to have visiting with us today in the gallery members from the championship team from Freedom Farm. We would like to spend a brief moment in recognizing the championship winning team at the Metropolitan Junior Baseball League of Richmond, Virginia in the United States. Shining brightly in the corners are two very large and esteemed trophies. You may hold them up so that we all can see and the cameras can get a glimpse. There we go. This team is comprised of under 10 and under 8-year-old boys and girls from Freedom Farm baseball program. The program is headed by Senator the Honorable Greg Burrows. And they are coached and supported by Mr. Stephen Burrows. And this may surprise you, but it's a fact. The Member of Parliament for Mount Moriah, Mr. Arnold Forbes, and Mr. Anwar Knowles. The coaches for the under-8 team are Mr. Dion Monroe and Mr. Ralph Burrows. And those lovely, wonderful-looking darlings are Ajan Cumberbatch, Kirkwood Smith, Aaron Forbes, Miles Adams, Justin Adley, Alantonio Knowles, Tavares Minnis, Faron Moss, Andrew Sands, DeMail Sands, Kia Monroe, Jahen Stewart. The under-8 team are Sky Hunter, Toby Simmons, Stefan Roll, Frankie Murray, Denton James, Ryan Reckley, Noah Dossett, Basil Dossett, Dwayne Mackey, Christian Monroe, and Rashawn Lockhart. This program, as indicated, is founded by Senator Greg Burrows, seeks to uniquely teach the art of baseball while mentoring and training young boys and our girls to become real men and dignified women in our society. It has been bearing fruit from its inception, and it certainly serves as a beacon of light and hope for our future generations. Honorable members, let's give them another applause. Yes, good things come out of our country. On a solemn note, I must add that the Fire Trail community of Garden Hills was rocked with sadness when 27-year-old Lyndon Oscar Sweeting died suddenly last week. Condolences are extended to Mr. and Mrs. Lyndon Oscar Sweeting Sr. and his wife and their fine family, and those who mourn his untimely demise. We are all very comforted, though, that he has been recalled and promoted to a higher calling by the King of Kings. May he rest in peace. You would note that the Chief Clerk of our Honorable Parliament is not with us today. Today we mourn the loss of a heroine of the highest order, the mother of the Chief Clerk, Mrs. Lottie Tynes, died early this morning of Bernard Road at the age of 94. Psalms 116 says that precious is in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. Truly a saint has lost us. Mrs. Tynes was a distinguished Bahamian, former registered nurse, and served as the first Director General of the Bahamas Red Cross Society in an independent Bahamas. She is survived by 4 children, Danny, Maurice, Michael, and Sharon Brown. A great Bahamian has passed on, and her work is now done. Condolences are extended to her family and those who consider them their friends. We also have visiting with us, if I may just pause for a moment, Miss Waltia Roll. I trust I said that correctly. Waltia Roll. Visiting with us, another outstanding Bahamian, first Bahamian woman to be drafted into the WNBA. And Walter, I'm going to ask you to stand one more time, because from here, I'm sitting up very, very tall. But from here, you still appear to be taller than I. Let us give her another applause. Thank you very much. Walter is a graduate, 6'6" graduate from University of North Carolina, the Tar Heels. I don't know about you, members, honorable members, but I am glad to be Bahamian. On Tuesday of last week, the community meeting of Garden Hills attracted well over 100 residents from the constituency of Garden Hills. The featured speaker for that meeting was Ms. Agatha Marcel, and she was accompanied by the Minister of Labor and NIB, who brought brief remarks. The focus of the meeting was to discuss the National Training Agency. By most accounts, the presentation was very informative and indeed timely. The residents of the constituency will continue to be exposed to relevant opportunities to be empowered with pertinent information. Thanks to the entire team of the Garden Hills Community Outreach, led by Ms. Carolyn Farrington and Dr. Risha Hepburn, the branch chairman, for a job well done. Continue to contact our office at 325-2000 for further information. There's another reason to celebrate, honorable members. Congratulations are extended to the Minister of Youth and Sports and his team, including Director Darren Turnquest, for an impactful special sitting of youth in Parliament on Friday, the 26th of July, 2013. I was particularly moved by the depiction of the opening of Parliament that highlighted the outstanding Youth Governor General, Camille Mins, who read the speech from the throne, and poised and confident Youth Speaker of the House, Mr. Keith Roy. The usual pomp and circumstances befitting a 284-year-old Parliament was done with excellence and precision. Even the youth members from that other place were in position in their customary seats, while the members of Parliament stood erect, albeit in the shade, and they were all one accord. Participating and observing the skills, level of maturity, and preparation of the youth parliamentarians was indeed memorable. It appears overwhelming, though, from the debate that the Constitution and civics should be a mandatory prerequisite for schools' curriculum going forward. This chair remains committed to uniquely affording young people further opportunities to utilize these ancient chambers for the purposes of training, exposure, and education. In fact, if we are in this place to be sincerely interested in seeking a great understanding of how, where, why, and what as it relates to young people, then we ought to ask them. And Youth Parliament is certainly a vehicle that bears this out. I found it very interesting, though, that I noted the manner consistent with the tradition of the mother of all parliaments, the British House of Commons, where the young MPs rose to their feet in eager determination to, quote-unquote, catch the eye of the Speaker during debate. This was indeed refreshing, though this was indeed a refreshing thought, though fleeting it may be, for consideration in this place. I congratulate the Minister and his team once again. Honorable members, at our last House sitting on Monday, the 22nd of July, we were unceremoniously suspended, firstly due to the disruptive behavior of the member for Kalani, after the member for Golden Gates was duly recognized to make his contribution to the stem cell debate. And secondly, after a brief suspension, the member for Kalani persisted in his obstinance and disobedience to the chair. The House leader moved for an immediate suspension once again to avoid further disruption. The actions by the member for Kalani was in stark contravention of our rules of procedure and disrespected the honor of this institution. But the actions of the member for Kalani didn't start there. For it was Wednesday, the 17th of July, 2013, the member for St. Anne's made certain allegations against members of the present administration alleging corruption, which several members objected. Upon the request of the chair, the honorable member for St. Anne's withdrew his remarks. In his attempt at an explanation and in defense of the honorable member for St. Anne's, the honorable leader of the opposition, member for Kalani, by words he then uttered, reiterated the allegation of corruption, this time against the right honorable member for Centerville, thereby placing it back on the record. The Prime Minister immediately objected to the allegations made by the leader of the opposition. The Prime Minister categorically denied all of the charges of corruption and directed at him by the member for Kalani. At this point, the chair, in accordance with the rules of procedure, requested the member for Kalani to either provide proof of the alleged corruption or withdraw his offending statements. The member for Kalani, in violation of the rules of procedure, refused both to provide proof or to withdraw the allegations. I wish to remind honorable members that it is the Speaker's duty to defend the honor of this House. The chair is also duty-bound to defend the honor and integrity of individual members during debates in this place. By words uttered on Wednesday the 17th and actions displayed on Monday, July 22nd, the honorable member for Kalani impugned the integrity of the right honorable member for Centerville, and offended the dignity of this House and showed contempt for the authority of the chair. The chair, having regard to the honorable member's disregard for the time-honored traditions of the House rules by which governs the authority of the chair, found the member to be in grave contempt. I might add that the chair has exercised great restraint in invoking reparation for the offending remarks and a gross violation of the rules. In fact, the member had 14 opportunities during the period of confrontation with the chair seeking to justify his actions. The Hansard transcript will bear this out. Additionally, the member had previously addressed this Parliament during the early stages of the debate, yet the member chose this moment to display defiance and disrespect. I wish to advance a definition of corruption for consideration of all honorable members. Honorable members must guard against stating their suspicion as actual facts. While suspicion sometimes proves to be well-founded, suspicion may often than not conspire to cause us to draw erroneous conclusions. The worst charge one member could lay on another is a charge of corruption. It covers a wide spectrum of damnable behavior, but its inference is narrow and very clear. What corruption is, in essence, is the acceptance of a gift, favor, or advantage by an official that causes that official to act in a way he would have acted had he not received the gift, favor, or advantage. Whereas a meeting between a minister and an individual may bring suspicion to the mind of a member or a group of members, it is not sufficient to support an allegation of corruption. When one member accuses another member of corruption, he must be able to unequivocally demonstrate by facts that that member against whom he alleges has been swayed in his judgment by receipt of a gift, favor, or advantage. Anything less will not be sufficient. If a charge of corruption levied against a public official can be sustained by facts, it deprives that public official of all moral authority to perform his public capacity. It is true for specific administrations, individual ministers, and all parliamentarians. This is why, in a case where a member does not prove his charge of corruption, the chair is duty-bound to demand an immediate withdrawal by the member who made the allegation. I'm advising all members, and in the future, to be guided by this advice. Honorable members, I believe it would be instructive to point out two important aspects of order in the House of Parliament as they relate to expungement and withdrawal. A rule of expungement by the chair speaks to the ordering of the removal from the records of the House for practical purposes of preventing duplication and recording for the dissemination to the public. Rules 30, 17, and 19 under manner and contents of speeches speaks to the imputation of proper motives and personal reflections on members that shall be dealt with the chair under the rules relating to order and in committees. And when any offensive, abusive, or insulting words are used by a member in the House or in committee, they shall be expunged from the record of the proceedings in order of the Speaker or the Chairman. The idea here is to preclude the propagation of unfounded allegations against honorable members. All utterances by members in Parliament are privileged, and therefore each member has only the chair as his recourse if he feels his character or integrity is being maliciously and deliberately impugned by another member. The rules are very clear as to how matters such as these are dealt with. Words emanating from this privileged place are to be discharged responsibly. It is the chair's responsibility to ensure as far as possible that unfounded allegations do not emanate from this privileged place. Admittedly, however, due to the advancement of our technological age and the spontaneous reception of what is said in Parliament makes this responsibility a challenging one indeed. Therefore, in ordering the words expunged from the records of the House, the chair complied with the rules to preserve the dignity of the House. By acting as it did, the chair discharged his duties to this House. But this is not the end of the matter. An order of withdrawal, on the other hand, is a different matter. In fact, it is a more serious procedural command and consequential for order and decorum. When a member withdraws, he's taking a position of honor and accepting full responsibility for his misutterance and, in fact, intimating that he misspoke and is therefore obliged to restate or show proof. I might add, this is the reason we are called honorable, and the chair remains unapologetic in seeking to maintain this rich tradition. My desire as chair is never to curtail debate. However, I am duty-bound to protect any member who finds themselves as victims to unsubstantiated attacks and blatant disregard for the authority of the chair and the House. If a member, therefore, in Rule 87, 4C, use objectionable words which he has refused to withdraw, that member may be named by the Speaker. The Honourable Member for Kalani also has a duty to discharge to the House, the Chair, and honourable members present his obligations. An expungement by the Chair does not discharge the obligation of the Honourable Member for Kalani. The honourable member has a duty to obey the rules, and no honourable member is greater than this honourable institution. At this point, therefore, the chair would like to give the member for Kalani an opportunity, having had time to fully consider the events of the last two meetings, to show just proof or withdraw his offending remarks forthwith. The chair will entertain the member for Kalani. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my entire life I have never seen half of the police force converge here in Parliament Square and in Parliament to arrest one man, to arrest me, when we are plagued with all sorts of criminal activity, rape, and robbery throughout our society. What I have said, Mr. Speaker, this is the most happiest day of my entire life. I have never felt so great, knowing that I am fighting for a cause, fighting for the people.
Honourable Member for Kalani, the chair orders you to show proof or withdraw the remarks. This is not an opportunity for speech.
I have no intention of withdrawing anything.
You are out of order. Resume your seat.
What I said...
Member for Kalani, turn the microphone off. Member for Kalani, withdraw. Member for Kalani, resume your seat. Member for Kalani, resume your seat. Members, the member has persistently and willfully obstructed the business of this House. The member has misconducted himself in a grossly disorderly manner. The member has used objectionable words which he has refused to withdraw. The member has persistently and willfully refused to conform to the rules and has persistently and willfully disregarded the authority of the chair. According to Rule 87, Clause 4, by the power invested in me as Honorable Chair of this institution, Hubert Alexander Minnis, you are hereby named and therefore unfit to be a member, to be present in this House for 2 consecutive sittings. I will now entertain a motion from the Honorable House Leader. I will now entertain a motion. I will now entertain a motion from the Honorable House Leader to move a motion to name the member Hubert Alexander Minnis, member for Bain and Grandstown. I put the question. To put the question.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the member for Kalani be named.
Do we have a second? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the member for Kalani, Hubert Alexander Minnis, be hereby named, and therefore the member has been, as many in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. The question has carried. The member has therefore been named. The chair orders that the member immediately vacates the precincts of this House at this moment. Member for Kalani, ordered that you leave the precincts of this House at this time. Member for Kalani, the chair orders that you leave the precincts of this House at this time.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends for 15 minutes, during which time the member will be removed from these chambers. As many are in favor, remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House suspends for 15 minutes. All right.
Back to the Parliamentary Channel's live coverage of the House of Assembly. We suspended as the member for Kalani was named by the Speaker for not withdrawing some remarks. Members are about to
as many.
Leave, continue with
The
that
chair
stem
recognizes
cell
Honourable Member for
debate.
Golden Gates.
And so let's go
Speaker,
to the chambers now as
gives me
members
great
prepare
pleasure
to
be in
continue.
this honorable place once again, representing the wonderful constituents from the great constituency of Golden Gates. Mr. Speaker, I just want to first take this opportunity to thank them once again for electing me to be in this honorable place, and to thank the Right Honorable Prime Minister for allowing me to serve in the capacity as Minister responsible for Labor, National Insurance, and the Public Service. As I continue to say, it's an honor that will be bestowed upon very few persons. First of all, to be a Member of Parliament, and on even fewer persons to actually sit around the cabinet table and make decisions on behalf of the entire country. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. I also wanted, first of all, Mr. Speaker, thank and congratulate the youngsters, first of all, and congratulate them for a job well done in representing the Bahamas, the Freedom Farm players. Mr. Speaker, I'm a big fan of discipline, having had discipline instilled in me at such an early age. And whenever I have an opportunity to speak to young people, I always tell them, if you could just become disciplined in one area of your life, it'd make it so much easier to be disciplined in other areas. And when you see the kind of discipline, Mr. Speaker, that's being instilled in these kids at such a young age, 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, I think it's a perfect age to start to instill that in them. And I congratulate them. I know it isn't easy, particularly when you're looking at competing on the world level. And so they're not champs of the Bahamas. They're champs of the world. They beat everybody in that category. Yeah. And so we really ought to congratulate them for a job well done, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also it would be sort of remiss of me if I didn't really speak to what occurred just a few minutes ago. Having, Mr. Speaker, regard to the fact that I sat in opposition for 5 years between 2007 and 2012, and on numerous occasions, not necessarily that I didn't believe that I was right. When the Speaker told me I was wrong, I believe I was right. But out of respect for the chair, I yield to the chair. The chair say apologize, I apologize. The chair say to withdraw, I withdrew, Mr. Speaker. And like I said, in most instances, I believe personally, Mr. Speaker, that I was right. But there are certain traditions we have in this place that we must continue to uphold. Yeah. And what is even more despicable, Mr. Speaker, is to see the disgraceful way that the members of the opposition, being led by their leader, carried on in the front of the kids, Mr. Speaker. You know, you would think, Mr. Speaker, that they would at least have the decency not to give the kids the impression that in a place where laws are made, we can be lawless, Mr. Speaker. And so when I saw what happened with the leader of the opposition, when I saw what happened with the member of Montague who actually attempted to physically assault a police officer, pulling on his tunic, Mr. Speaker, I would be surprised if it wasn't torn. How could you, Mr. Speaker, being a lawmaker, come in a place where we make laws and break the law and be dishonorable while you're doing it, Mr. Speaker? And in such a blatant disregard for leadership. Mr. Speaker, at least if the member for Kalani had attempted in some small way to justify his action by presenting just a shred of evidence of what he said, then you could sort of excuse him. The Speaker didn't even attempt. He made no attempt to justify what he said. His only position was he's right. Right about what? Just present the evidence. Either you present it or you withdraw. Yeah. That is what happens in this place, Mr. Speaker. And so I just think, Mr. Speaker, that what we saw happen here today should never, ever should never happen again in this honorable place. And I hope that the kids who saw that take that as a life lesson as to how not to behave. How not to behave, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I continue to say that most members opposite continue to act in the most hypocritical way possible. There's one standard for them and another standard for us, Mr. Speaker. I remember when, during our last term in office, there was an alleged fight in the Cabinet office. They called for the immediate termination and resignation of the two persons who they said were involved in this fight. There was no proof of it. but then you can have a sitting member of parliament physically assault my hero. No, physically assault my hero. Right? As member for Fort Charlotte. And then they praise her. They act like she did the most wonderful thing in the world, Mr. Speaker. I remember sitting in this place in disbelief, Mr. Speaker. I'm only showing you how the hypocrisy in what they do. I know there's one standard for them and another standard for us. I remember sitting in this place, Mr. Speaker, right over there, when the then member for Gardeners was sitting over here. And he spoke about how Mr. Ed Curlin gave him all kinds of donation, because Ed Curlin was his friend. Never mind that he was the parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Housing, and they gave Ed Curlin all sorts of contracts to build houses and housing. But despite that, and the fact that the house that he built had major defects. Most of the houses he built, they had to spend an average of $50,000, $60,000 repairing the houses. And the member got up in here and said, Ed Curlin is my friend, and he made donations to me over the years. You can imagine a PLP member of parliament saying that? You can imagine that? But, Mr. Speaker, as the Bible said, as a man thinketh, so is he. And because word on the street, Mr. Speaker, because word on the street, Mr. Speaker, is that they're so corrupt, then I believe, Mr. Speaker, that they believe that everybody is corrupt, Mr. Speaker. And like I said during the last election campaign, we had to actually go and get DNA evidence for the cookie jar. Because they licked it clean, Mr. Speaker. Not a single thing left in the cookie jar. Licked it clean. And it wasn't until we got the DNA evidence that we realized, Mr. Speaker, who actually was responsible for licking the cookie jar clean. Mr. Speaker, and then you listen to the hypocrisy as it relates to the stem cell. And mind you, I can understand why the member for Kalani is so concerned. Because he got one of his deputy leaders, right, deputy chairman, Mr. Speaker, who was on his tail, Dwayne Sands, who says that he fully supports stem cell. I listened, Mr. Speaker, I think it was on the 23rd or the 24th of July, Bahamas, at sunrise. Well, I listened to Dr. Dwayne Sands speak about this young man, speak with this father, whose child was taken to Panama because he was paralyzed from the waist down. And the only thing that could help this child was stem cell treatment. The only thing. And so if this legislation was in place here in the Bahamas, there would be no need for the child to have been taken over to Panama. And Dwayne Sands talked about the wonderful results they saw after the treatment of the stem cell in Panama. And so I understand now why, partially, why the member for Kalani is saying that he's against stem cell. Mr. Speaker, I have to say that because I'm going to present to you in a minute minutes of a meeting where held and chaired by the member of Kalani when he's the Minister of Health. And he fully supported and endorsed stem cell, Mr. Speaker. You can't produce it. Fully supported and endorsed it. I got the minutes of the meeting, Mr. Speaker, that I produced. But all of a sudden now, Mr. Speaker, they're against stem cell. So you have to ask the question, Mr. Speaker. And I always refer to them as the elitist party. Why is it that they don't want the ordinary Bahamians to have access to treatment that they can fly all over the world and get? Because they're elitists. I mean, look at when we were talking about national health insurance. They went on a wild campaign. National health insurance is terrible for the Bahamas. That's because they could afford to fly anywhere in the world and get treatment. That's right. But the ordinary man who national health insurance will determine whether or not they live or die, they're telling them they shouldn't have national health insurance. They say, anyhow, you don't deserve national health insurance. What we'll do is we'll give you the prescription drug plan. That's good enough for you. That is the elitist attitude in them, Mr. Speaker, coming out. It is too good for the ordinary Bahamian to have national health insurance, but, you know, just as a consolation, we'll give you the prescription drug plan. Mr. Speaker, you know, take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning, Mr. Speaker. And so I want Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, to be careful and to think very carefully about these individuals who are telling you that we should not regulate stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas, while they themselves, Mr. Speaker, would fly off to where they could afford to go and get the same stem cell treatment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of Parliament and Bahamians everywhere listening to the sound of my voice, I'm going to state quite frankly that I, Shane Gibson, have nothing to hide, nor do I have any hidden agenda. like my colleagues opposite in the FNM. Mr. Speaker, we were talking the other day about meeting Mr. Peter Nygaard. Mr. Speaker, there's nothing strange about meeting foreign investors. And then I heard, the member for Montague, I think it was. I'm going to show you the picture with us sitting up big and bold at Nygaard House. Long Island, member for Long Island. No. What she said, she was very crafty. She said she never went to Nygaard House, but she went to Nygaard's mother house. But Nygaard's mother don't own a house in the Bahamas. Both of those houses belong to Peter Nygaard. And so I'm going to show you the picture, Mr. Speaker, where she's sitting up right next to me. At Nygaard House. Right next to me on Nygaard House, Mr. Speaker. But what she would do, see this here? See this? This is at Nygaard's house. There's no such thing as Nygaard's mother house. This is Nygaard's house. Mr. Speaker, my point, Mr. Speaker, is the hypocrisy and them trying to paint the picture that we're doing something, first of all, wrong or unethical, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It happens all the time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the facts are that Mr. Peter Nygaard is a well-respected, self-made billionaire and philanthropist. Mr. Nygaard has been a resident of the Bahamas for more than 40 years and a permanent resident of the Bahamas for over 30 years. First, during the course of his time here in the Bahamas, not only poured money, but his very heart and soul into helping the Bahamian people from all walks of life. So, Mr. Speaker, for those persons who would try to give the impression that Mr. Nygaard just started spending money in the Bahamas over the past couple of years, they know that's a bunch of nonsense. For 30-plus years now, he has spent over $20 million supporting Bahamians from all walks of life. Mr. Speaker, in fact, Mr. Nygaard has come to be regarded as a friend of the Bahamas and a friend to all Bahamians. And I'm quite sure Mr. Nygaard, when he lends his assistance to Bahamians in need of help, does not ask them whether they are PLPs or FNMs. He automatically gives from his heart, Mr. Speaker. But yes, in the usual hypocritical manner, a number of members from the side opposite in the FNM have outrightly denied ever meeting with Mr. Nygaard. While in the government, Mr. Speaker, I knew Nygaard when I was a little boy. And I watched these FNM members of Parliament, cabinet ministers come there playing poker and playing tennis with him. Right there at his property. Playing poker and playing tennis on a regular basis. Even when I was in opposition. And I went there, we saw these members from the government playing poker and playing tennis with him, Mr. Speaker. Former government. The FNM government it is.
You mean the gamble?
Mr. Speaker.
You mean the gamble?
Let me share with you a few facts, Mr. Speaker. Fact number one. The Member of Parliament for Long Island has in fact been to Mr. Nygaard's house in a capacity as minister, just as some of us went in capacity as ministers. The difference is that we have nothing to hide, and nothing improper took place. Fact number two, Mr. Speaker. The former Prime Minister, Hubert Ingraham, went joy riding with his grandkids on an investor helicopter. This is something he said, We didn't say this. He went on national radio and said, I took my grandchildren to play with Aga Khan's grandchildren. That's what he said. He said that. Mr. Speaker, I want you to just imagine a PLP member of Parliament or a PLP Prime Minister saying that. That would have been all over us. He said he went to do that. This is the same man, Mr. Speaker, they gave permission to dredge in the sea park in Exuma, an area that was never before allowed to be touched in Exuma, in the Marine Sea Park. But, Mr. Speaker, they don't say anything wrong with that. See, that's the FNM. If the PLP had done it, it would have been a different story.
That's the Aga Khan man?
This is Aga Khan. Mr. Speaker, fact number three. Credibility is extremely important. And I want Bahamians everywhere under the sound of my voice to question how credible the FNM is when deciding whether to accept the utterances of those opposite who have yet to accept that they have been disgracefully rejected by the Bahamian people. Their past relationships and approvals will help the Bahamian people to understand why they are taking the position that they have at this time. For example, when you have someone with several personalities and a violent behavior, who's resorted to physically attacking my hero, who on a regular basis, as we have observed, displayed wild outbursts and constant uneasiness with appearance of being constipated. We know how difficult it is sometimes, Mr. Speaker, to sit in opposition. We've been there. Mr. Speaker, just let me share with you what they did when they were in government. Why they think that we're doing the same thing, Mr. Speaker. The first person I'm going to talk about is Mr. Derek Turner. Right? Mr. Derek Turner is one of the partners of Long Island. She invested with him. She invested with him.
You mean the member of Parliament?
The member of Parliament for Long Island. She invested with him, Mr. Speaker. Derek Turner, Mr. Speaker, applied for his permanent residence, Mr. Speaker, on the 19th of October 2001. The 19th, Mr. Speaker. On the 16th of November, less than a month later, he had an interview, Mr. Speaker. On the 29th of November, he got his permanent resident status.
Wow.
The 29th, he got his permanent resident status, Mr. Speaker.
That did not happen. In 3 months?
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at that time, Mr. Speaker, he applied to be an economic permanent residence, which means that you would have had to invest at least $500,000 in a residential home. He didn't have that. He had signed an agreement with the intention of purchasing this property, Mr. Speaker. But he didn't have it at the time.
So that was illegal?
Mr. Speaker. On intention, Mr. Speaker.
No, that was illegal.
It says, approved the 29th November, subject to the acquisition and maintenance of a home.
Wow.
Subject to. So they approved and gave him permanent residence, subject to. When the policy was clear, you had to have invested this $500,000 in a residential home. Before consideration. Even before you could be considered, you had to do it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we have to understand who Derek Turner was. Mr. Speaker. And we do the same. You see this? A national embarrassment. This is from the Tribune. National embarrassment, Mr. Speaker. He was charged with Derek Turner, swindler, is jailed for 20 years.
That's the Tribune saying that?
20 years. This is the man they gave permanent residence to in 4 weeks.
What's the swindler?
Swindler. He swindled millions of dollars from investors. And so the question you have to ask is, when you look at how quick he got his permanent residence status, was it because of the proposed investment being done by the member for Long Island? I don't know. Because somebody had to be close to Mr. Speaker for him to get it that quickly. Because under normal circumstances, that don't happen. And you see, they had a party, Mr. Speaker. They had a party. You see the hosting? They had a party hosting Mr. Derek Turner. They were lifting him up. The same man who swindled millions and millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker. F&Ms. The Red Bulletin and all the rest of them, Mr. Speaker. All of them, Mr. Speaker. And then, Mr. Speaker, there's Martin Tremblay. Martin Tremblay, Mr. Speaker. Time going. If I need extra time, Mr. Speaker. Martin Tremblay, Mr. Speaker. I want you to listen to this now. Martin Tremblay, all this happened under the F&M. Martin Tremblay applied for his permanent residence on the 21st of April 1994 under the F&M. He was seeking to purchase a home, but he was currently running on Paradise Island, Mr. Speaker. He applied on the 21st of April 1994. On the 2nd of May 1994, from the 21st of April to the 2nd of May, it was submitted to the Immigration Board, and it was approved. He applied on April 21st, and on the 2nd of May, it was approved. Now, who was there? Who was Martin Tremblay, Mr. Speaker? Martin Tremblay was another one who was convicted of money laundering, tax evasion, all sorts of things. Ended up serving time in the U.S. jail, Mr. Speaker. He's one of those persons, Mr. Speaker, who really should be persona non grata. I'm just going to read you a small portion. The international money manager sentenced to 4 years in prison for laundering narcotics proceeds in a government sting. So he was managing a bank and laundering drug money through this bank, Mr. Speaker. This is Martin Tremblay, who got his permanent residence in a matter of, 9 days. 9 days he got his permanent residence.
Without meeting the basic requirements.
And his intention, Mr. Speaker, was to purchase a home. He hadn't purchased it yet, Mr. Speaker.
What inference will you draw?
Mr. Speaker, you see now why they think we are corrupt? When you looked at the corrupt practices that they established over the years, you know, it's like a man who grew up in the jungle. You see him acting strange, swinging the trees, you put him in the car, he jump out the car. All you know about is swinging in the jungle. You know? And so now you got these persons who had carried out these corrupt practices all their life, also got their governance, and so they're now thinking that we're the same as them, Mr. Speaker. And then, Mr. Speaker, to add insult to injury, there was another fellow called Ron Kelly. As you know, Mr. Speaker, Ron Kelly was one of those persons who, Mr. Speaker, was one of the principals of the Hilton Hotel. Let me tell you what Ron Kelly did. This is something that they welcomed him to the Bahamas, even though he had a serious past. He was a Catholic priest. Right? Now, I hope I can pronounce this word. And it says that Ron Kelly's vulgar displays of power. Kelly has never spoken publicly about the past or present, and reluctantly agreed to an interview, saying, I guess it's better to talk than let you take a shot in the dark. In 1979, Kelly pleaded guilty to 10 sexual assaults on 5 boys.
What?
Ages 13 to 18. This is Ron Kelly. This is the one they welcome in the Bahamas. I'm just trying to show you, Mr. Speaker, the type of persons they welcome in the Bahamas. They can't put Mr. Niger in this category, Mr. Speaker. This is a well-respected billionaire throughout American, throughout Canada. We visited one of his factories the other day. He had 100,000 square feet of space. In one of his factories. He gets factories in Singapore, China, all over the world, Mr. Speaker. Nothing like these people who are welcome in the Bahamas. Right? It says the scripts show the assaults mostly involved Kelly's fondling of teens while he was in a drunken haze. In the most serious cases, a sober Kelly had a boy performed fellatio. What's fellatio?
Oral sex.
Fellatio. A sober Kelly had a boy perform fellatio, and afterwards gave him $5. The Toronto Sun recorded this on the 20th of July, 1997, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we understand now why they continue to measure us by their yardstick. And then, you know, if you notice, this happened, the references I'm bringing to you happened back from 1994 coming forward. But just to bring it close to home, this didn't stop when they came back in office between 2007 and 2012, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there was a man called Bodo August Schnabel, Mr. Speaker. I think he was a German resident, Mr. Speaker. Schnabel. He was a German resident who wanted, Mr. Speaker, to apply for his homeowner's card, Mr. Speaker. And when he applied for his homeowner's card, they had SIB and the Financial Intelligence Unit do a vetting on Mr. Schnabel, Mr. Speaker. Let me read to you the letter, Mr. Speaker, from the Financial Intelligence Unit. It says, I refer to our conversation to you dated the 27th of September 2010, concerning the above captioned subject. That's Mr. Schnabel. See same attached for ease of reference. Please be advised that our analysis of the suspicious transactions reported pertaining to the subject has been completed. My office is in possession of information received from law enforcement in Germany, confirming that the subject in 2002 was convicted and sentenced to 7 years in prison on market price manipulation, insider trading, and fraud. The subject was said to have been incarcerated from March 2002 to September 2005. All judicial proceedings concerning this matter were said to have been completed. Mr. Speaker. This is Snubble. This is the man who SIB and the Financial Intelligence Unit said that he should be placed on the restricted list. But they got a directive from the then Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Immigration, the Honorable Brent Simonet, to issue him his homeowner's card. Mr. Speaker, you see the trend here? All of these criminals coming to the Bahamas and being welcomed with open arms by members of the Free National Movement government. And in some cases, one of them, when you look how quickly that was rushed through, you know that they had something in mind. Give it to him quick. I got to make this investment. And needless to say, the member from Long Island herself ended up getting swindled. I think the court case just finished a little while ago, and she was able to get some of the money back. But Mr. Speaker, my point is simply this, right? We have stem cell research and therapy that we're about to introduce in the Bahamas. This is something that can be life-changing and life-saving for many individuals. This is something, and we're not talking about embryonic stem cell, we're talking about adult stem cell. And so while they're trying to mix it up and give the Bahamas the impression and keep referring to embryonic stem cell, it is adult stem cell. This is something that's proven all over the place, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, then there was a letter, Mr. Speaker, there was an individual who was approved to do stem cell in Freeport, Mr. Speaker. And you know, word on the street, Mr. Speaker, that this approval was given because something exchanged hands. And so listen here, my brother. You don't have any laws in place. This industry is not regulated. But this is a quid pro quo, you could get it. And so apparently he was given it. That's the word on the streets. I don't know if it's true, Mr. Speaker, but that's the word on the streets. But let me just read to you the minutes of a meeting being attended by Dr. Hubert Minnis, Minister of Health, Ms. Johnson, Permanent Secretary, Ms. Lynn Hollowesco, I want to remember her name because she's a lawyer. Lynn Hollowesco, Matthew Fiesbach, and Michael Martin. President of the Senate at the time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Fiesbach explained the procedure he wishes to have considered in the Bahamas. The application came into the ministry from the Office of the Prime Minister and has been referred to the Chief Medical Officer for the Medical Council. He informed that this procedure has been approved for application in Europe, although the FDA in the U.S. has not approved it. The procedure uses adipose-derived regenerative cells treatment and is being done in Tampa, and he anticipates over 2,000 patients per year. There are about 2.2 million patients for this therapy in the U.S. He also envisions other treatments. His expectation is that patients will have a 5-day stay. The procedure itself takes about 2 hours with an inpatient stay of 2 days. This is important. The minister noted, the minister noted that the U.S. FDA is usually behind Europe. This is the minister. So the U.S. FDA, Food and Drug Administration, is usually behind Europe in approving new procedures. He explained that in the Bahamas, the documentation for this procedure has to go to the Ethics Committee for its review, that if the procedure has been approved by Europe, the Bahamas will usually follow. This is the minister saying this. Wow. The minister asks, this is Hubert Alexander Minnis. Member for Kalani. He said that the Bahamas will usually follow. He's telling investors now that once it's approved in Europe, the Bahamas will usually follow. The minister asks whether if the ectomic vessels are themselves treated, if the underlying problem goes away. He also wanted to know if retreatment is necessary. Mr. Fiesbach informed that because the longer treated patient has only had the process for 36 months, none has required retreatment, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is the minutes of meeting held on Wednesday, the 6th of April, 2011.
Could you table these documents?
Now, a letter was then written, Mr. Speaker, to Dr. Vincent Forbes regarding the same stem cell facility in Grand Mama. After meeting with the minister, after showing that the Prime Minister approved it at the time, Hubert Ingram, they then sent it to the Ethics Committee, and this is what they wrote. The Ethics Committee convened on December 14, 2011. Its review of the above captioned research proposal noted several merits to conducting a study in the Bahamas. As such, your application is approved in principle, Mr. Speaker. Approved in principle, Mr. Speaker.
No
regulations in place.
No laws.
No, let me, and now, Mr. Speaker,
If we can't manage
elections come, Mr. Speaker, so they're approved in principle.
manage it without.
If you just bear with me, Mr. Speaker, I'll just read this next letter from the owner of this facility in Grand Bahama, and this was written to us because we wanted to know what happened, because we knew there were no laws in place, but we want to know how is it that you could get approval. This is what he wrote. I came to Nassau in May 2010. This letter, he wrote this letter to us in July of this year. Just wrote it a couple of weeks ago. I came to Nassau in May 2010 and met with Minister of Health, Dr. Hubert Minnis, and Minister of Tourism, Vincent Vanderpool Wallace. Both expressed strong support for Okeanos. Okeanos is the facility they authorized to conduct stem cell research and therapy in Grand Bahama. Without any legislation, Mr. Speaker. I have to keep saying it. Didn't have any legislation. Just bear me 1 second, Mr. Speaker. After a medical consultant briefed Minister Minnis on the use of adult stem cells derived from a person's own fat tissues for heart disease, using the EU-approved technology, Okeanos is utilizing. Minister Minnis stated that he and the Minister of Tourism had just briefed the Prime Minister on bringing in innovative medical technologies approved in Europe but not yet approved in the U.S. And the Prime Minister signed off.
Without legislation.
He signed off on the strategy. He then expressed his support and enthusiasm for Okeanos. We then applied for approval for Okeanos treatment with the Ministry of Health Ethics Committee. We received the initial approval with Dr. Winston Forbes being our sponsor. This approval is attached. It was granted on December 11, 2011. Following that approval, Dr. Forbes withdrew our sponsor due to our not choosing to locate our clinic in his building. I then went to meet with the Minister Minnis. And explained the situation. Mr. Minnis advised that Dr. Terasopoulos would be an appropriate sponsor and that we would not need to reapply for approval for the treatment.
Well, that's why he's behaving like that.
Just the sponsor change.
That explains a lot.
Wrap up, honorable member.
Last paragraph. He advised, I worked with the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, whom I did
Member for Michael.
Whom I did work with, and we received the new Ethics Committee approval with Dr. Terasopoulos on March 16, 2012. In summary, Okeanos had complete support from Minister Minnis, as is documented by the approvals we received under his term as Minister of Health, Mr. Speaker.
So he is alleging
Mr. Speaker,
that
just to wrap up.
Did something wrong, but he actually...
They knew before they gave this approval in principle that there was no legislation in place. He fully supported it. Met with him and said not only that he supported and the Minister of Tourism supported, because they're looking now at medical tourism, but also that the then Prime Minister Hubert Ingram also supported and signed off on it. And now they have the gall to come in this place and deprive the Bahamian people from the opportunity to receive this life-changing treatment. Mr. Speaker, I say to you, the devil is a liar. I support this legislation, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member. As many, the chair recognizes honourable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Mr. Speaker, let me thank you for this wonderful opportunity to allow me to speak for and on behalf of the wonderful people of the West Grand Bahama and Bimini constituency. People who have demonstrated throughout the years their resilience, their strength, their leadership, and their support for myself, Mr. Speaker. And so I speak for them today as we seek to move our country forward and cause our nation to be a leader among nations in the world. Mr. Speaker, let me begin by first and foremost saying that when faced in any difficult situation, it is on those occasions that you recognize leadership. Let me thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your demonstration of leadership in this House today. Mr. Speaker, we, and generally people, have different ways of doing things. But when faced with circumstances, and you are required to cause for, as we heard in the brief message this morning from our chaplain. It's about discipline, Mr. Speaker. It's about discipline. It's the same discipline you demanded of my brother, Brother Rollins, when in Port Charlotte was making statements in this place, when he made some statements about Kalani, he raised some questions. You did not allow the proceedings to continue until he withdrew. And even though he held his position as strong as he possibly could, raising and reading from documents, you did not allow the proceedings of this House to continue until you protected Kalani, Mr. Speaker. And so for Kalani to be in this place today and over the last several weeks behaving as if he is some hero and he is standing and speaking for democracy when it wasn't democracy, it's hypocrisy. That's what he was speaking for, Mr. Speaker, because you stood in this place and you made that member withdraw. You made that member withdraw, Mr. Speaker. And so today, no one could question the fact that you've been fair, you've been even, and you've managed the chair of Speaker, Mr. Speaker. And so therefore, when we in this honorable place bow to you at the bar, we do so in honor because you've demonstrated you've earned our leadership. Mr. Speaker, I have another problem. And I have this difficulty, Mr. Speaker, because over the past 20 years of my life, I have been able to walk with a man who has given me an opportunity. I brag and I boast about having had Sir Lyndon Pinley as my political mentor, who opened many doors for me, Mr. Speaker, and taught me a number of things. But then there was another man who gave me the opportunity, to first and foremost get in the Senate, Mr. Speaker, when he stood up to the leadership at the time, and he called on the leadership to be careful of the precedent of the setting. Because at the time the thought was, and there was some concern, that we should select senators by committee. And he stood and he said, no. If you set that precedent, one day when I'm leader, I will be stuck with that precedent, and I don't think that's the way to go. And when Farm Road took that position on that occasion, Mr. Speaker, it opened the door for me to enter politics as a young man, early in my 30s. Just as he's opened the door for many of these young men in here today and women, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir.
And so to be sitting in this place and wishing to tag him with the word corruption causes me tremendous difficulty, Mr. Speaker. It causes me difficulty because if you know his history, he's been in the Parliament of the Bahamas for almost 40 years, and never once he's been accused. Never once has accusation been made and or proven that he is associated with anything corrupt, Mr. Speaker. In fact, taking positions at times where he could behave as a maximum leader, where he could make the decision, where he could decide I'm going here, as opposed to calling for committees or commissions for discussions, getting other people's views, involving the general population before making decisions, Mr. Speaker. He could have done it other ways.
Yes, he could.
But he brought the country in his belief in democracy, in his belief in the participation of all the Bahamian people. And so today, to recognize that a man who came into this place, who sits as leader of the opposition, understanding what his role is in the constitution of our country, would wish to call the leader of our party, the prime minister of our country, corrupt, to send that message to the world. That's corrupt, Mr. Speaker. That's corrupt, Mr. Speaker. When you know that you're being absolutely dishonest, only because you're looking for that road in which to walk, that avenue, that opportunity, because you want to sit in this chair, that chair, you will say any and everything. That's abuse, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, it is.
And because the member for Farm Road sits and takes it, Centerville, sorry, sits and takes it, Mr. Speaker, We don't sit and take it.
No, sir.
And it has caused in our organization, our ranks, it's caused us to be very concerned, very angry, because we work with this man every day. We sit in rooms every day. We get frustrated every day, because when we want to take the shortcut, he's saying, no, you can take the right way.
That's right.
When he was reaching out across the seas and looking for people like Deborah Cox, Desiree Cox, who is our Rhodes Scholar, and he reached across and he brought her home, Mr. Speaker. That's right. Brought her home to help in building this country. That's what he does. He reaches out for young people, for Bahamians to participate, gives them opportunities. And when you do that as a leader, when you begin to show that I want to build my country, I want to make a difference, when you're doing things every day, when you're talking about how we're going to cause the entire country to participate in the growth of this economy, when you're reaching out to get investors to come, and you're talking to tons and tons of investors about opportunities, about spending, about investing in our country, and when you think about opportunities and you come with ideas that could cause more people, look at Bimini, Mr. Speaker. Bimini, look at where Bimini is today. And whilst we're still working on ensuring that everything goes well, when the opportunity presented itself in Bimini for one or two individuals to have public service licenses and to have plates, franchises as they're known, the leader of our party, the Prime Minister of our country, said, why can't more people participate? Why can't we create the opportunity for more Bahamians? That's what drives him, Mr. Speaker. That's what causes him every day to sit in this chair. Because he believes and he knows with the right team we can make a difference. And so, Mr. Speaker, for the member for Kalani to do what he did, to stand in this place and then talk about this the happiest day in his life. Most happiest day in his life. Because he figured now he's going to be the star of some 15-minute performance. Yeah. Because it's going to make a difference, because somebody's going to see him and he's going to get the emotive support. And somebody's going to say that he stood up to the PLP. Mr. Speaker, that's not leadership. And that is why the member of parliament for South Abaco is still in this place. The member for South Abaco, that's man. He's been through experiences. When he stood up against the party that he was always a part of, he said, I'm taking a position. He took his position, and we respected him every day. And when he takes a position, it's predicated upon the principle he holds. And he's been in this parliament. And he knows full well you can't bring the evidence, you can't bring the support, then you have an honorable responsibility to stand and withdraw. Yes. And then don't sit here hoping to be some performer or some star because you want to get to the front page of the newspaper, or because you want to dominate the headlines, or because you are seeking to cause the tides to turn. And this country will one day say, well, that's the man that I want to support to become the leader of our country. No, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian people are looking for leaders. They're looking for people who could bring to the table ideas, creativity, opportunity. They have a vision for the country. Yes. Not people who are going to cause you to be ashamed or to be ashamed of your leadership. Those young men sitting in this room today, those young athletes who came in this place today, who are told that they got to be to practice on time, who are told that they've got to look at the signs when the coach gives them the signs before they can bat, bunt, or walk. Mr. Speaker, we now decide in this place today, the leader of the opposition, that that's the example he wants to set.
Yes, sir.
That he is going to cause them to see them fighting against even the Royal Bahamas Police Force, when every day we're talking about the question of crime in this country. When you could demonstrate, you can demonstrate what it requires when you're wrong to say, I'm wrong. That's what you want. Leadership that will give you an example. Leaders give those persons who find themselves on the wrong side of the law that sometimes you've got to stand up and say, I'm wrong.
Shining principles.
I'm wrong, Mr. Speaker. But here it is today, on display, We have the young Bahamians sitting here, champions, who walk away knowing that the world is watching the manner of our bearing. And then he goes in here today, and that's the performance when you gave him an opportunity. Right. You didn't come in here and say, I closed in the book on him. 14 opportunities. You gave him the opportunity. You say, man, stand and take it. You gave him an out, Mr. Speaker. But he didn't take it. He demonstrated that he is not fit to be the leader of the FNM or any party in this country, and certainly not the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker.
Long Island, Kusiera.
And then, Mr. Speaker, we are here celebrating. We have the first Bahamian to be drafted by the WNBA. Historical, Mr. Speaker. But look at the performance today. When we should have, as a people, been celebrating where she's come from, where those young men have come from, Mr. Speaker. That's what we should have been doing. And so when the member for Kalani say this is the most happiest, well, this is my most saddest for our democracy, Mr. Speaker, because I think that he demonstrated today, and at the end of the day, how does he expect any of us? How does he expect any of us anytime soon? What he said about our leader. He wants a record to remain that he has asserted that our leader is a corrupt man. Could you imagine that, Mr. Speaker? That's what we do to each other? That's the level of honor we pay in this place to each other? Or respect for each other? No, Mr. Speaker. No, Mr. Speaker, I didn't intend to speak on this matter at all, you know, Mr. Speaker, because I thought my colleagues had made the case. I certainly listened to the member, the Minister for Health, and I know he made the case. But, Mr. Speaker, I cannot sit down and not say how I think about this whole matter. I am really disgusted by it, because I've been in this place when they told me I had to withdraw something, or told me that what I said was wrong. And I had to sit back and take it and withdraw. And now today we're sitting here telling the entire country law and order means nothing, discipline means nothing, the rules of the house means nothing, we'll abuse them, and when we don't like what you say, we'll let you name us, and then we'll get thrown out because it looks good for the cameras. That's what we believe in, Mr. Speaker. That's all it's about. It's a public relations effort. Nothing to do with the principle of democracy or the understanding of the role of government, the role of opposition in our democracy. Nothing to do with it, Mr. Speaker. And on such a serious note, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and then you heard the member who just spoke. And if you were looking for a case against the opposition, he made a case.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir.
He made a strong case. Because some of the things he talked about, some of us wasn't even aware.
Must he find them in the garbage can? We got all the papers.
But just tells you how we are, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir.
We will say one thing and then to hear that the leader of the opposition in fact supported stem cell.
Yes.
Supported the revolution.
Without law.
Or the evolution. Supported it, Mr. Speaker. But now he's saying something completely different. Completely different, Mr. Speaker. Well, how do we expect him to lead this country now? One day you're here, the next day you're here. All over the place. We've seen it before.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen it before, but it appears to be habit now. One day you believe this, and then the next day you can say this, and it doesn't matter, Mr. Speaker. Well, if we're trying to build a country, Mr. Speaker, have we stopped, have we given consideration to what the Prime Minister announced last week, or what was announced last week, when he went to the United States of America, went to Florida, met with the University of Miami, a leading institution, a leading university, Mr. Speaker, and they have now agreed to work with the Bahamas in this whole effort we're making, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what more do you want? That is significant. That is major, Mr. Speaker. That's a major university in the United States of America, a leading university. And now we are saying we're going to team up because we're going to find a way to position the Bahamas to become the trailblazer in this new form of medicine. That's what we're saying. We're saying that we want to be the leaders. We're not just accepting to be a player. We don't just want to sit around the table. We want to lead, Mr. Speaker. And to lead, you've got to take some decisions. And the Prime Minister led a delegation, the Minister of Health, the Attorney General. They were in Florida. And they made it happen, Mr. Speaker. And we should all be proud of that. That's what we should be celebrating, that a major, giant step was made toward advancing. And all the people who are talking all over the world every day, every single day, Mr. Speaker, as Minister of Tourism, we're getting information about this medical tourism conference. This one in Florida, this one in Costa Rica, this one in Trinidad and Tobago, this one in another part of the world. Every single day. You know why? It's an emerging industry. An emerging industry. We took, Mr. Speaker, one of the leaders of our tourism industry, Carla Stewart, who for the last 10 years has been heading our cruise division. We've now placed her in the development of our medical tourism division, Mr. Speaker, because we want to have one of our major players working with the government in causing this industry. When I was a reporter, Mr. Speaker, when I played a bit of football, Mike Bass, who played with the Washington Redskins football team, he got injured. And he came to the Bahamas for treatment in Grand Bahama. There was something going on there at the time. He found the Bahamas, and one of the things he said at the time was, not only did you have the practitioners, the best treatment was, of course, the environment, was the water. He came to the Bahamas, and we've seen that I saw that in Grand Bahama for many years, where you had people coming into our country, which was in fact a form of medical tourism. But it's always an issue whether or not we have the regulations in place and what needed to happen. What we're advancing now, Mr. Speaker, is a way forward. We're advancing an opportunity for the Bahamas to become that place where the world will gather, where we'll begin to see opportunities, where new technology will come, Mr. Speaker, where some of the leading minds in the industry will come to the Bahamas, will be able to bring as consideration new businesses, opportunity, wellness centers, hospitals, where Bahamians can advance their thought processes, and where we could have the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to become one of the leaders. So, Mr. Speaker, those who see the narrow perspective and have made it about a single individual, I have a difficulty with that, Mr. Speaker, because individual. We're talking about how we're going to advance an industry in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, which requires diversification. The Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, that must look at how we're going to cause more and more for this economy to grow. How are we going to get more and more of the greenbacks in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker? How are we going to cause our economy to move from 2% to 3% to 4% to 5% to 6%? How do we utilize what God has given us? How do we make it happen? Unless we reach out, we determine that we want to be leaders, we bring people in to assist us in getting and advancing, and once we get to that point, Mr. Speaker, then we become an industry that will cause and help our economy to grow. We have to utilize what God gave us. Yes. We can't be some of these other countries. We got to look at what we have. And we do have Bahamians who are now involved, whether it's Dr. Dwayne Sands or Conville Brown, all who are talking progressive about where we have to go, Mr. Speaker. And so we cannot not support where we are. We got to stay focused on where we're going. We have to stay focused on causing this to happen, Mr. Speaker. We must not fail to move this country forward. The Prime Minister has been leading the charge. He's been very aggressive. The Minister of Health has done exceptionally well, Mr. Speaker, in getting us where we must be. And so for us in the Ministry of Tourism, we certainly welcome it. We welcome the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, because we are going to be attending these conferences, bringing in the views of the various people from around the world and their thoughts of how we can cause this industry to grow. Mr. Speaker, there's a colleague of ours who went to high school with us at Queens College. His name is Dr. Curtis McMillan. He's in California. And when he made contact earlier this year, or last year, with the member for Engliston, he had views on what we ought to be doing about medical tourism, about stem cell, about how we can cause this industry to grow, and the things that we should be watching for. It's a Bahamian abroad, Mr. Speaker, but saying to our country, I'm with you. Here's the opportunity. It excites, Mr. Speaker. It creates that dynamism that we require. It causes Bahamians to believe that we can achieve almost anything. That's what we have to think. And so to take this debate and to cause this debate to be centered around a single individual as opposed to the broader picture, which is what I see, Mr. Speaker, the broader picture, and to look at how we could cause this to happen and how we can lead the world, how we could be a player, how the world will be looking to the Bahamas, see how the world marks the manner of our bearing. That's what we're saying, Mr. Speaker, in fulfillment of the words that we sing in our national anthem. That's what we're doing. And so, Mr. Speaker, I support this legislation. I support the efforts, but I know it's but one step. It's just a start point. It is the validation of our belief. It is the opening. It is causing us, Mr. Speaker, to be able to move to the place where we want to be, Mr. Speaker. And so I support this 100%. Mr. Speaker, again, let me say, when we come to this place, we come in this place with honor. We come in this place, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian people has elected every one of us, have given us an opportunity. We live for them, we fight for them, we work for them, Mr. Speaker. And when we come in this place, we have a responsibility. And no one today could celebrate the behavior of the member for Kalani. No one, Mr. Speaker. When you move to the level of leadership in this country, you are to behave in a particular way, because you must then give advice to others. He is supposed to be advising his younger members on how to behave. Our leader doesn't give you right when you're wrong. Our leader will tell you, although you may not see it, and because he doesn't go out and show off all the time about what he said to you, he'll tell you when you're headed in the wrong direction, Mr. Speaker. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, my argument today is very simple. I believe that today demonstrated several things. The first was leadership that had to be demonstrated. The second, Mr. Speaker, was a lack of discipline that we saw in the leader of the opposition, Mr. Speaker. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we have lost focus on an important issue for this country. And that's where we must be focused on where we want to take this country in advancing the Bahamas in medical tourism, certainly led by the whole question of stem cell research, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, West Grand Bahama and Bimini fully supports this legislation. We support this legislation, Mr. Speaker, and I know this is but the first step. And I'm sure that the steps forward will be very progressive. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The member for Bain and Grandstand, are you standing for presentation for your remarks? If you will, if you will pause just for a second. The Chair just wanted to take a brief moment to announce a few visitors in the gallery that I thought fitting at this time. A past member of this place, Rubian Darling Cooper, we're delighted to have you. Members, let's give and of course, my friend Werner Gruner and his friends from South Africa, private banker and founder of the Starlight Foundation with Dr. April MacGyver, anesthesiologist, and of course, Gandhi Pinder. Welcome once again. It's certainly nice to see each and every one of you with us today. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am honored to speak in this Honourable House on behalf of the people of the Bain and Grandstand constituency to make a contribution in this very important debate. I wish to express at the outset how disappointed I am that such an important topic as those to which this bill gives rise have been relegated to the unimportant, while the occasion has been turned into an ignorant, uninformed, pretentious foray into lies, accusations, misrepresentations, and confusion. I attended a church service not so long ago at Mount Calvary Baptist Cathedral in Bain Town, and the preacher spoke about something he called distractions. And he pointed out to us that every time there was something good about to happen in the Bible, there would always be the distractions, trying to get us off theme, off focus, Mr. Speaker. And it is that way in this country. Every time the government of the people are promoting something for the benefit of the people, there are the distractions which are pitted across the board. They are the detractors, as the member says, who seek to diminish the importance of what you are seeking to do in order to discredit you. I'll give you another distraction. Just now somebody handed me something written by the member from Kadani. Said I, the member for Baintown, influence you, the member for Garden Hills, to say what he said, that the member for Senator was corrupt, to say, suggesting that we are seeking to stop him from talking. He had his full time during the debate, Mr. Speaker, do you remember? And he made a number of accusations with which I will deal today. Mr. Speaker, first man up. He couldn't wait. Not only the leader of the opposition would wait to hear what his members are saying, to hear what members of the government saying, so that he could provide a leadership response to the case. But I know. He wanted to be first out the gate. And he was. But, Mr. Speaker, before I deal with him, I want to congratulate the mover in this debate, the honorable member. Yes, sir. Because it was so long ago that he may have forgotten the excellent presentation that he made, Mr. Speaker, in which he outlined the fundamental tenets of this bill. Remember now, we're not debating NIGAD, we're not debating corruption, we're debating the importance of stem cell research and therapy, and what it can do not only for Bahamians but for humanity, Mr. Speaker, and the role that we might be able to play in this development. But I congratulate the movement, Mr. Speaker, outline the fundamental tenets and the impact that it can have on health care, on health research, on health education and therapy for a multitude of illnesses and medical conditions for which today there is no treatment or there is inadequate treatment. In his presentation, Mr. Speaker, he set out clearly an understanding of the potential downsides of the research and treatment with stem cells. But he also set out in detail the processes, the methods, the personnel, and the infrastructure that will be put in place to prevent any unethical, inappropriate practices and to protect the general public, including donors and recipients in stem cell research and therapy. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition, a scientist, no less, and I always say a good one at that, erroneously, in my view, spent the majority of his time bellyaching about the lack of capacity of Bahamians, listen now, to undertake such research and therapy, and of course the inability of the Bahamas to provide the regulatory environment and our institutions or personnel to monitor, evaluate, or regulate the industry, for want of a better term. Now, Mr. Speaker, 44 years ago, I graduated in medicine. 44 years. I know I don't look it.
15, you were 15. You were 15 then.
That's a long time, member.
44 years. You were 15 then. Not early.
I returned back here 39 years ago to practice medicine in the Bahamas. 39 years. Mr. Speaker, 39 years ago, you could talk that stuff he was talking. We don't have the people, we don't have the experience, we don't have the facilities, we don't have the capacity. But this is 2013, for God's sake. Here we go. You know, in 2 Kings, the question is asked, what must I do? Just wait here and die?
That's right.
Or must I try to improve
Yes.
Speak.
You stick with my
my society, my condition?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, brother.
Speak.
What must I do?
Yes, sir.
Just wait here and die? What must we do in the Bahamas? What do we have to do
That's right.
to convince these not at this time people?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Always not at this.
That is at this time, every time.
Thank you, my friend. Again, you got it. You got it. You got it.
Why are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we continually telling ourselves we cannot do?
Yeah.
Good God Almighty, I thought every Bahamian is a yes I can type of person today.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. That's it.
You led the Caribbean, man.
Mr. Speaker, I came here a few months ago, I think it was, and said that when the Bahamian students went down south to compete in the medical research to present their papers, the Bahamian students had the best papers in the entire Caribbean.
Yes. Right.
We couldn't say that 44 years ago.
No, it's this year.
Mr. Speaker, we turning out doctors at the Princess Margaret Hospital. We couldn't say that 14 years ago. We're progressing, Mr. Speaker, and what gets me is the member for Killarney is a part of that progressive progress. Can you say progressive progress?
If you could say most happiest.
So, Mr. Speaker, really, according to him, he's opposed to the Bahamas being involved in stem cell research and therapy at this time because A, the Bahamas has yet to receive an ideal primary health care service for its citizens. B, we have no indication that the facility will be adequately staffed. C, in an article in a national magazine, you all remember the magazine? The Bahamas is mentioned among rogue states engaged in stem cell therapy.
1994.
My dear Mr. Speaker, that was a reference to a case quoted in Good Housekeeping magazine, which referred to a case 13 years ago, when his government, the FNM, his party, the FNM, was the government, and they allowed unregulated
That's right.
and apparently fraudulent stem cell therapy in which the complainant said that she had paid some $25,000 with poor outcomes. Now, he tried to make it look in here as if what he was reading was some medical or scientific journal and that the period about which they were speaking was today.
That's right.
But the PLP's record
That was true.
with respect to stem cell therapy in the Bahamas is that when the Minister of Health in the last PLP government discovered that there were practices going on in Grand Bahama which were inappropriate and unregulated, he closed the operation down.
That's right.
And his position was until there were adequate regulations, until the people doing the work were authentic, until they were properly qualified, until they were properly certified, it couldn't go on, Mr. Speaker. Stem cell research and therapy, if it is to be safe, ethical, and respected by the international medical profession, must meet international standards and protocol and be open to independent scrutiny, Mr. Speaker. He's saying, I don't understand why there's the rush. Where will the research take place? Will this highly skilled no, if you want to know where will the research take place, I want him to tell me. When he approved Okeanos,
That's right.
where was the research supposed to take place?
And he approved it. And he himself approved it.
Telemarketing.
Then they decided that the original facility in which they were going to do the work was not appropriate. Then he referred the Okeanos people to the doctor in Nassau, who was resident in Nassau to be supervising the work in Grand Bahama. Where was the research supposed to take place?
Wasn't important then.
He wanted to know, will the highly skilled subspecialty employ Bahamians? How many work permits would be issued to be and provide as health specialists. How many Bahamians will benefit from research in the next 5 to 15 years? The question I ask is, did he ask that question and he gave approval? The answer is no. But we are different. We are different. Distinctively different. Because the number for North Andros and the Berry Islands, when he presented me with a copy of the bill, he presented me with a draft copy of the regulations too. And everybody would admit that that's an unusual practice in this parliament, Mr. Speaker. The leader of the opposition said that he hardly believes that we can expect short or medium-term financial gains, and wanted to know, does the government expect that this research will produce a new tax? He said the Bahamian people know that we cannot even enforce seatbelt laws. He said in the early years we were known as bootleggers. During the 80s we were known as drug pushers. And we were classified as a nation for sale, and today we are selling false hope. But I want the leader of the opposition to know that this is a different day. That's right. We are a different government. And no matter how many times they tell the repeated lie, the fact of the matter is that the government led by Honorable Member for Centerville has set a standard that we will not waver from. Have a set of principles. When we said Bahamians first, we meant Bahamians first. Doesn't mean Bahamians only, because there are some skills that we do not yet have. There are some facilities that we do not yet have. There are even some capacities which we do not yet have. But what do you want me to do? Wait here till I die?
Capacity building.
Or do you want us to build it?
Right.
Do you want us to seek the support for it? And that is precisely what we are doing, Mr. Speaker. The minister in his presentation, member for North Andros and the Berry Islands, spoke of the importance of a sound, ethical oversight committee and indicated that the required personnel are not domiciled in the Bahamas and that it would be necessary to attract and engage very specialized experts to strengthen and enhance what exists locally, to build what he called a robust, internationally, professionally respected cadre of individuals in the area of research. That's what he said. The principle, Mr. Speaker, very clear. He spoke of the opportunity that is being created to welcome the return of Bahamian scientists. And all you have to do is travel throughout the United States and Europe, and you will find them, Mr. Speaker. We believe they don't exist, but we don't know what happened in 1967.
Right.
When a decision was made to give every Bahamian child an education.
Right.
Long before George Bush said it, they said, leave no child behind. And Mr. Speaker, as a result of that, we've had failures, without a doubt. But we have a tremendous cadre of Bahamian academics and professionals spread throughout this world.
I saw an 18-year-old today. Oh yeah, 18.
So what we want to do, Mr. Speaker, is welcome the return of Bahamian scientists from across the globe to contribute in the development of science in the Bahamas and in projects such as this. He stated, I'm speaking about the minister now, that the facilities would have to be state-of-the-art, which means international accreditation, and that participating professionals would have to be certified with licenses to perform the specific tasks in which they would be engaged. Mr. Speaker, right now, in the Bahamas, we have, in the member for North Andros and Berry, I don't want you all to sleep on this, one of the foremost Caribbean, American in its widest sense, global professionals in the field of HIV and AIDS. And I remember when he started on this journey, you know, when he started on this journey, I don't think he knew where it would take him. But if you want an example of what can happen with someone working in the Bahamas, with Bahamians, with a zeal for health care, with a passion for superb medical practice, and with the willingness, Mr. Speaker, to sacrifice monetarily to put in place what is needed to counteract AIDS in this community, there he is. Google him. The point I'm making is, if he could do it in HIV and AIDS, other Bahamians could do it in stem cell research and therapy.
Recognized internationally by the Clinton Foundation.
Right? You know, I was jealous of him a little bit, you know. Because, you know, when Bill Clinton was calling Bay. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, going by his name.
You understand? Recognized internationally, Mr. Speaker. But these Bahamians with these picayune minds, who believe that...
What kind of mind?
Picayune. Minds. Who don't believe we could do anything.
That's right.
I wish we could help them.
That's right.
I wish we could help them. You know, when the Honorable Minister, former Minister, Member for Kalani was talking about telemedicine, he was forgetting, but he was onto something. He was onto something. Okay? So why sit down to diminish this very important initiative? Mr. Speaker, there are opportunities, economic opportunities, there are health benefits for Bahamians, there are higher paying jobs, there are considerable... Mr. Speaker, we have in the Parliament, the member who just walked in has a daughter. A daughter who is an extremely intelligent, the member for North, Anderson the Barras, with whom she works, says she's brilliant. Scientist.
Molecular biology.
Molecular biologist, Mr. Speaker. And you can spell that?
What that is?
You remember the pastor's mother, so you might be able to spell it? Molecular always spell for you? M-O-L-E.
Molecular biology.
Wow. PhD.
Mr. Speaker, I'm saying these things because I want the average Bahamian to understand that while we are a small country, and we do not have an opportunity in every sphere of life, if we choose properly, and if we commit ourselves, and if we put the resources, and the time, and the energy, and the passion, Mr. Speaker, we can succeed at anything.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
The Minister also addressed the question of enforcement and indicated that this might be an area of potential weakness. And particular measures, including more qualified personnel in the inspectorate and the close monitoring of research and therapy projects, would be taken. That's what the Minister said. Nobody's walking into this as if we're going into the glory land. What we are doing now is seeking to establish in our country a project, Mr. Speaker, which will enable us to provide, in due course, a better quality of health care for our people, and a great opportunity for Bahamians to participate in providing it, in the economic benefits of it, and so forth and so on, Mr. Speaker. Every time I talk in here, my time will go faster than everybody else time.
Please speed the clock up.
No, it's me.
For this reason, Mr. Speaker, the Act and the regulations will create a framework to cover all aspects of stem cell research, including clinical, non-clinical, and therapeutic uses. It will establish strict regulatory standards and procedures, Mr. Speaker, licensing, oversight, and enforcement mechanisms, and legal penalties, Mr. Speaker, which are designed so that the legal standards are, in fact, upheld. There will be a scientific review committee, Mr. Speaker, to ensure a sound scientific basis exists to allow the research and therapy to proceed. It must review every person who conducts research and therapy to ensure they have the appropriate training and experience. It will have an ethics committee, Mr. Speaker, that will ensure the highest ethical standards and consistency with Bahamian values. There's a national committee, Mr. Speaker, which will review and approve the members of the scientific and ethics committees. It is really an ultimate oversight committee, which will issue guidelines regarding the criteria for membership of those committees, guidelines determining the types of research and therapy that are permissible, restricted, or prohibited, appointed by the Minister of Health, and must include persons with credentials in science, medicine, education, ethics, community leadership, law, and at least one member who is internationally recognized as a leader in stem cell therapy, Mr. Speaker. Now, I invite the members to compare this extensive, comprehensive approach at setting standards and regulating them with what the Honorable Leader of the Opposition did when he was a minister.
That's right.
In 2010, the leader, when he was Minister of Health, along with his colleague, the Minister of Tourism, as we've heard, met with at least one principal of a company called Okeanos, and I am told, Mr. Speaker, they briefed the minister on the use of adult stem cells derived from a person's own fat tissue for heart disease. Mr. Minister stated that he and the Minister of Tourism, as the member of the Golden Gate said, had briefed the Prime Minister on bringing innovative medical technologies approved in Europe, but not yet approved in the United States. That's how they presented it to them. And they approved it, Mr. Speaker. I have a new series bunch of papers here. I got the proof of which I speak, Mr. Speaker. What I'm asking is, why is it, if he was prepared under those circumstances to permit it, and if he had taken the time to read the bill and the regulations which are proposed, why did he oppose it? It was to be a distraction, Mr. Speaker. And he was very successful at creating a distraction, Mr. Speaker, because we are here still debating this matter when it ought to have been passed into law some weeks ago. Mr. Speaker, there are benefits for Bahamians, new science-based jobs. Now Bahamians who are qualified in this level of science must, generally speaking, work abroad. It will upgrade the quality of research in the Bahamas to international standards. We are crying out in this society for research in many fields. One of them is education. And I have to commend the Minister of Education, who is seeking to set up institutions which will require research and education in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. So that our curriculum reflects our needs, Mr. Speaker. So that the training of our young people reflect the opportunities that we have in our country. Mr. Speaker, we have to do it. We need Bahamian scientists who can work along with the best international scientists versus via exchange programs. Education and training for young Bahamians, scholarships and training locally and abroad. All the healthcare services must be upgraded to first-world standards. This is what causes it to happen, Mr. Speaker. When you set a project which requires a higher level of performance, a higher level of accountability, a higher level of commitment, that's how you improve a society. You take it on as a challenge. Speaker, the member for Centerville started talking about a new generation of leaders. And some people thought it was just a catchphrase. But I say today, as I've said before to my colleagues who sit in this place, I heard the Prime Minister speaking the other day about one of our friends who was not doing so well, and he said something like, you know, we are in the last decade of our lives. You know, when you pass 60, you got to take 70. And you know, the Bible promises you square and 10 under certain circumstances. You don't get it just so. And then a further 10. So what I'm saying is, this new generation of leaders, Mr. Speaker, who are well educated, very talented, who have a passion for rebuilding or continuing the expansion and the build-up of this country, they have a tremendous opportunity, Mr. Speaker. Now, what are they to do? just stay here and just go to the same humdrum things that we've been doing all these years?
Nowhere.
Mr. Speaker, if we waited until the right time, we wouldn't have a college of the Bahamas. Had we waited till the right time, we wouldn't have a national insurance. If we waited till the right time, we wouldn't have a defense force. If we waited till the right time, we wouldn't have majority rule. If we waited till the right time, we definitely wouldn't have independence. The right time is now. Now is the right time, Mr. Speaker. Now is the right time because we can conceive it. And once we have conceived it, one by one we might be able to achieve it. But if we work together, you bring yours and I bring mine, we can achieve it. And Mr. Speaker, we're going to make the member for Kalani a liar. Not by causing him to be a liar, but by achieving the objectives of the STEM research committee. And just as they had to come back and accept what national insurance could do, what the College of the Bahamas has done, what the Defense Force is doing, what independence has achieved, they will also have to come back and say, boy, we were wrong yet again. Mr. Speaker.
They don't know right from wrong.
Mr. Speaker, cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, old timers. All these are robbing our societies of the capacity or of the experience of so many people, of the capacity of the human spirit. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we can do more than shoot guns and kill people. We can do more than be violent and be convicted as criminals. One thing I've learned is those same fellows who we accuse of those things, if we give them the opportunity, we can turn them into nation builders. I want to invite the members of the opposition to bring themselves back in here to do the job that the men and women of the country elected them to do. And to realize that there are rules and regulations, and it's not only for me, it's for you too, Mr. Speaker. Come on, man, let's do the work of the people. They always say they want to help, but we wouldn't invite them. The Prime Minister, the ceremony what they call, has invited them to come and be a part of building this country, of introducing new projects, of expanding opportunities for the young, Mr. Speaker. That's our mission.
Here we go. Thank you.
I, for one, intend to seize every hour of opportunity that's left for me to receive to do for others what people like Carl Francis, Naomi Blatch, Cecil Bethel, Anatole Rogers, you remember those names? The teachers. Lyndon Pinman, Margaret Butler, Doris Johnson. You know who they are? They're us. They are our forebears. And they left us a goodly heritage.
Oh, yes.
And it would be wrong for us, Mr. Speaker, not to build upon that. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Right Honourable Member for Centerville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to avail myself of these few minutes before lunch to indicate that I am absolutely amazed, having spent now 40 years in Parliament, and next year would be my 40th year in public life. I don't think I've ever witnessed a display that makes no sense whatsoever. I don't think people could not see that I've been a successful politician. And I tried my best to understand what could have been the political
motive or motivation of the leader of the opposition. Because I sat next to him last Saturday at the opening of a conference of Adventists, where we both spoke on behalf of the Bahamas. And I indicated to him that just that day, or the day before, a noted QC had cried shame on Perry Christie, the Prime Minister, shame on Perry, because he had no respect, like the leader of the opposition had no respect for me causing him to be prosecuted. I knew nothing about it, but I'm not going to ask him to apologize. I was libeled. I'm not going to ask him. I don't want him to. I don't want the leader of the opposition to apologize. I'm going to use it as political motivation to ensure that the people who represent the Progressive Liberal Party on this side always understand and never forget their overarching responsibility to the people of this country who elected them in mighty numbers in the last general election. I also want them to be assured, and I'm going to tell them a story. When I was Minister of Health, I served in that capacity between 1977 and 1978. The head of department of Yale University came to see me after conducting surgery at the Princess Margaret Hospital. I told him that we had no ophthalmology coverage at the Princess Margaret Hospital. And I negotiated with him coverage by residents of Yale University in that period, 1978-1979. I negotiated that Yale University would come to the Bahamas and provide coverage until such time as our specialists return to the Bahamas. And this is going to be important as I speak, to remember this. Now, near 40 years later, they are still providing coverage at the Princess Margaret Hospital, where residents, people who are specializing in ophthalmology, continue to come here as part of what I negotiated in advancing medical care in this country. And I want to be able to say that that same spirit took me to the University of Miami. And I'm going to speak to this substantively during this debate, where I met with the president of the university, and I'll speak to her by name. I met with the head of the medical fraternity, the dean of the medical school, vice president of the university. I met with a very, very famous fellow who was brought in from Johns Hopkins, a Dr. Hare, who headed the research on stem cell at the University of Miami. And beyond my wildest expectation, they offered to partner with the Bahamas in ensuring that we have a regime in here that will be second to none. I just want to say it again. They said that to date, FDA-approved practices, that they are investigating 7 diseases using stem cell therapy at the University of Miami, and they are prepared to come to the Bahamas not only to ensure that our regulatory regime is put in place, not only to ensure that we have the therapeutic and research practices or modality in place to examine what's taking place, Mr. Speaker, but to assist the Bahamas and Bahamian professionals. And let me say this. They boasted about a young lady who is the daughter of Helena Bond, who deceased, a former permanent secretary, who's now doing research in neurology or neurosurgery at the University of Miami. And they spoke about her. A Bahamian. They spoke about their pride in having as a part of their medical medical studies, a famous athlete who I will speak to, who has just come into the University of Miami to study medicine. They spoke about these things. They spoke about a future relationship with the Bahamas government that will enable medical students and medical postgraduate students who are looking to specialize, being able to find their way into the University of Miami. How much more could you expect? Mr. Speaker, we've agreed, Mr. Speaker, to establish a joint working group to complete by August the relationship that we would have with the University of Miami. And just let me say this. They are engaged now in specific research involving 7 diseases. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to come to this point, but I have no doubt whatsoever, none, that we are going to usher into the Bahamas a regime that will be respected internationally and that will attract some of the greatest scholars of the world. Right. In my presentation, Mr. Speaker, I will demonstrate that the scrutiny, that the protection the Bahamas needs, that the enforcement that people are talking about will come as much from the scientists who are coming in to protect their reputation. Because in every case, there are either famous professors from well-known universities or current professors at well-known university who are coming to the Bahamas associated with these projects to conduct research. And they're coming from universities like Stanford, like the university that we heard about, North Carolina, from Duke University, from the universities in Florida, from the University of Miami. Dr. David Allen wrote me this morning. We're talking about reputation. We're talking about the Bahamas. And this is just my introduction to my speech before you go to lunch. Dr. David Allen said, after speaking with several individuals regarding a program that came on JCN, I want to inform you as follows. Dr. James Mangagello is a highly respected research scientist on the board of directors of Harvard School of Public Health. He invented the machine that warms blood, which the patent was recently purchased by General Electric. Dr. Mangagello developed the Provia laboratories. He, along with a number of key Harvard researchers, developed the Provisiat containers that store stem cells for the federal government, and has just been awarded another $18 million grant to continue this work. Provia Company also collects stem cells from teeth, which in Italy have been successfully used to grow bones, and is on the threshold of finding a cure for type 1 diabetes. Stem cell research is a burgeoning science on the cutting edge of technology. I have known Dr. Mangagello for many years and feel that he would be a perfect fit for our local stem cell research committee. He is a frequent visitor to the Bahamas, coming twice a year, and is currently in the process of purchasing a home here. I have attempted to contact you on several occasions to discuss this matter. Dr. Allen wants him to come on board, and he will come on board. And this is how he ended. He said, I am currently in my vacation home in New York. He's doing very well. This is Dr. Allen. But would be happy to discuss this matter with you at your convenience. I wish you all the best tomorrow during the stem cell debate. Stem cells are the future of modern medicine. I want to end this before lunch by indicating that one of the most significant, if not the most significant, proposal put in the Bahamas government for stem cell therapy and interventions, and limited stem cell therapy and limitation, is by Dr. Conwell Brown. Dr. Conwell Brown's name came up at the University of Miami, and he's highly respected at the University of Miami. I see in a press statement today where the leader of the opposition has extended himself, and in addition to connecting me to NIGAD that I will speak about after lunch, he's connected me to Dr. Porter. And I don't mind what the leader of the opposition does, because he has proven to be, to me, as someone who is not a doctor, someone who seems to have not had the right kind of education in medicine, because if he describes himself as he did in his opening statement, that I'm a man of science, I'm a scientist, then everything he said after that was devoid of scientific knowledge and scientific reasoning. And so I'm surprised at that. But I'm speaking very authoritatively on it. I'm speaking very authoritatively on this. But I just want him to know this, that we are taking pains to communicate to the world that no minister is going to sit down and approve NIGAD or Conwell Brown or Dr. Richard Stack. We have set in the law layers of approval. there's a National Ethics Committee.
Yes.
After the National Ethics Committee, there are scientific committees to be appointed. There are layers in the law to determine the fitness of someone to practice stem cell research and intervention in this country. No minister, no politician.
Nope.
It is, the point I want to make is this. Dr. Stack, who is the partner, Dr. Stack, who is the partner of Condell Brown, is director of interventional cardiology at Duke University. He authored over 360 manuscripts, book chapters, and scientific abstracts. He is the inventor of numerous technologies that have become widely adopted by physicians all over the world. He has over 100 worldwide patents issuing or pending on a wide variety of medical devices. Dr. Stack is Professor Emeritus of Medicine and Cardiology at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, where he spent his entire academic medical career. Since 1979, he retired early from his academic career to join the investment community, and he is investing and the major shareholder at Duke University. And he developed the dissolvable stent that you use in heart. These are people of extraordinary repute and great scientists, right? In 2006, he also became managing partner of Synergy Life Science Partners, a $144 million life science investment fund. In the past 12 years, Dr. Stack has co-founded or invested in 13 major medical device companies, including Synacor, the largest multinational med tech corporation in the world, including et cetera, et cetera. Now, the point I make, sir, is this, that Dr. Stack, Dr. Condell Brown have applied. Their application is a full application, not more so than any other that has come in, more so than Okeanos. It sets out the reasoning, but it does two things. That as we speak, they talk about a $2 billion investment by an American company in forming a hospital or establishing a hospital in the Cayman Islands for medical tourism reasons, run by Indians. Right. They speak about a hospital being formed in the former site of the hospital in Barbados, again by Americans. I think of when I was Minister of Health, and the people came to me to start the St. George's Medical School, and I, based on the advice at the time, said no. And I watched as Prime Minister that school become credited because it wasn't the right time. When I became Prime Minister this time, and Okeanos was in a position where I have all of the evidence that the minister participated in it, and I will talk about this. I mean, it's just so absolutely incredible that in this 21st century Parliament, someone could actually participate in giving permission for someone to be in the Bahamas, then get up here and contradict it and deny it. It is the worst, it is the most sensational display of hypocrisy one could ever want to see. And really, it's difficult to even express it. It's difficult to express it. That how in the days Bahamas, someone who is leader of the opposition, who wants to be Prime Minister, could sit in this Parliament, having superintended a process where people applied for a license, and where not even the rudimentary investigation was done. Because if only an investigation you do for investors was done, they would find out that the lead person on the team was before the courts of Florida for bankruptcy. Not even that was done. Not even that.
Not even that. Just go on trial at the end of the month.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstown. Order, members. Sorry? Members. Mrs. Leader. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mrs. Leader. I wanna move.
A quite appropriate time to move.
I want to move the suspension of the House, but before, as we do so, Mr. Speaker, I think it would be remiss of
members.
It would be remiss of us if we did not take this opportunity to express to the Clerk of the House sincere regrets and condolences on the passage of his mother. Mr. Speaker, Lottie Times was no ordinary woman in this society. She was a legend in this society. And you see Mr. Tynes walking about here and so forth. He has a mother who was perhaps one of the greatest leaders in health care in the Bahamas. For decades. And the only regret you have on occasions like this is because there's so many people of that ilk who don't get the recognition from the society that in return for the value of the quality of work that they've done amongst us. That anybody, certainly in my age group and those just behind me, would remember Mrs. Tynes, the Red Cross, the vaccinations, the child examinations, the immunizations. Mr. Speaker, she made a tremendous contribution to our country. A resident of the constituency of Foxhill, I believe, and I'm sure that the member for Foxhill will find an opportunity to pay his tribute to her. But on behalf of all of us on the government side, Mr. Speaker, in fact, all members of Parliament, I think that she is due our respect and our expression of sincere regret at her passing.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favour will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House is suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
All right.
Well, that ends an eventful morning here at the House of Assembly. 3 o'clock this afternoon, we got a preview of Prime Minister Christie and what is to come this afternoon as he concludes debate on stem cell research and therapy. And we know what happened this morning. The member for Kalani, Dr. Hubert Minnis, named by the Speaker after refusing to withdraw statements made about Prime Minister Christie. Later, the member for Golden Gates, the Minister of Labor, Shane Gibson, making his presentation and making reference to several persons who have been resident here in the Bahamas, who he says, according to the evidence, the opposition FNM has no right to accuse the Progressive Liberal Party government of anything because they are more guilty of apparent corruption than anyone else. Also hearing from the member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, Minister of Tourism Obi Wilscombe, again decrying what he says is the absolute disgraceful way that Bahamians, particularly politicians, continue to vilify each other when they come into the House. And of course, leader of government business in the House, Bain and Grantstown, Dr. Bernard Nottage, decrying the deterioration of the debate that should really be on something as important and substantive as stem cell research. And again, Prime Minister Christie giving a preview of what he intends to do at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Members just before they suspending, sending condolences, of course, to Chief Clerk at the House of Assembly, Maurice Tynes, whose mother, Lottie Tynes, died, long-time Director General of the Red Cross, actually the first Bahamian to hold that job, dying early this morning. Again, debate done here, suspended here in the House of Assembly. 3 o'clock this afternoon is when we will be back. We'll see you then.